Did you know that one of the Bible's most remarkable prophets accurately predicted the rise and fall of four world empires hundreds of years before they occurred? Or that this same man survived a night locked in a den with hungry lions? Daniel's extraordinary life wasn't just about surviving impossible situations. It was about receiving apocalyptic visions that many scholars believe foretell events still to come in our future. But before we dive in, if you're new to this channel, consider hitting that like and subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, let's get straight into it. The year is 605 BCE. The world is changing. Empires rise and fall like the tide, and caught in this shifting current is the tiny nation of Judah. Far to the east, a new power has emerged from the desert sands, Babylon, with its hanging gardens and towering ziggurats reaching toward heaven. Its armies march westward under the banner of King Nebuchadnezzar, a ruler whose name would echo through time. Jerusalem stands vulnerable. The once proud city of David now trembles as news spreads of Babylon's unstoppable advance. Egyptian forces have been crushed at Carchemish. The Assyrian Empire has crumbled. Now nothing stands between Jerusalem and the Babylonian war machine. King Jehoiakim of Judah paces the palace halls. Should he surrender? Fight? Seek an alliance? The prophet Jeremiah walks the streets, warning of doom, his voice a lonely cry amid the bustle of a city refusing to face its fate. In homes and markets, families whisper fears of what may come. Then, one autumn day, it happens. The horizon darkens with dust clouds, metal glints in the distance. The Babylonian army arrives at Jerusalem's gates. The siege begins. Days pass, food grows scarce, water becomes precious. The city's defenses weaken. Finally, King Jehoiakim makes his choice: surrender with terms. Jerusalem will pay tribute. The temple will remain standing. But there is a price beyond gold and silver. Nebuchadnezzar's commanders enter the city with a list. They seek the brightest youth of Judah, the most gifted, the most promising, the royal and noble children. These young ones will be taken to Babylon, not as ordinary captives, but as future servants of the empire. Among them is a boy named Daniel. The families gather at the city gates. Mothers cling to sons. Fathers give final blessings. The chosen youth stand silent, eyes wide with fear and wonder. This is no ordinary captivity. They will be educated, trained, transformed into something new. Bridges between cultures, unwilling ambassadors in a foreign court. The caravan departs Jerusalem. The young captives look back at their shrinking city, not knowing if they'll ever see it again. Ahead lies a journey of nearly 900 miles across deserts and mountains. Ahead lies Babylon, the greatest city in the world, the heart of an empire, and soon to be their new home. As they travel, the landscape changes. Gone are the hills of Judah, the familiar olive trees and shepherds' fields. Now they pass through strange lands with unfamiliar tongues. At night, under stars that suddenly seem different, Daniel and his friends huddle together, whispering prayers to a God who feels ever more distant. After weeks on the road, they crest a final hill. There in the valley below, sprawled along the banks of the Euphrates River, lies Babylon in all its glory. Walls so thick that chariots race along the top. The magnificent Ishtar Gate, gleaming with blue glazed bricks and golden beasts, temples rising above the cityscape, and at its heart the palace of Nebuchadnezzar, where these children of Jerusalem will either thrive or perish in the new world that awaits them. The storm has broken. Jerusalem still stands, but its future has been carried away in the hearts and minds of its children. And among them walks Daniel, not yet knowing that his journey has just begun. The boy's taken. The gates of Babylon swallow the young Hebrew captives like a great beast. Guards lead them through streets teeming with life. Merchants hawking goods from distant lands, priests in colorful robes, soldiers standing at attention. The noise overwhelms their travel-weary senses. The smell of strange spices and unfamiliar foods fills the air. Daniel walks with three close friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Their shoulders touch as they move forward, finding comfort in each other's presence. All around them towers the might of Babylon, not just in its buildings, but in its confidence. This is a city that believes it will last forever. Palace officials sort through the new arrivals, examining them like prized cattle. The best-looking, the strongest, the smartest are separated from the rest. Daniel and his friends find themselves among this select group. They exchange worried glances, unsure if this special attention brings good fortune or greater danger. "You are no longer children of Judah," announces Ashpenaz, the chief eunuch. "From this day you belong to Babylon and to King Nebuchadnezzar." His words fall like stones. The reality of their situation sinks deeper. The renaming comes next, an ancient practice, a rewriting of identity. Names carry meaning, carry heritage, carry faith. Hebrew names whisper stories of their God and their ancestors. To change a name is to attempt to change the soul. "You," says Ashpenaz, pointing to Daniel, whose name means God is my judge. "You will be called Belteshazzar, in honor of our god Bel." Daniel's face remains still, but inside something rebels. His friends receive new names too. Hananiah becomes Shadrach, Mishael becomes Meshach, Azariah becomes Abednego. With each new name, a piece of home seems to fade away. They are led to their quarters, surprisingly comfortable rooms within the palace complex. Clean clothes await them, Babylonian garments of fine linen. Servants bring water for washing. The contrast to their dusty journey is stark. This captivity, they realize, is unlike any other. They are not prisoners in chains, but assets being polished. That night, alone in their new quarters, the four friends gather quietly. "They may change our names," whispers Daniel, "but they cannot change who we are inside." The others nod in agreement. In this moment, a pact forms between them, to remember who they are, to hold fast to their faith, even as everything around them urges them to forget. Morning comes with the beginning of their education. Babylonian tutors arrive, carrying clay tablets and styluses. The Hebrew boys must learn a new tongue, Chaldean, with its complex cuneiform script so different from their own alphabet. They must study astrology, mathematics, literature, and the lore of Babylonian gods. Some of the captives embrace this new learning eagerly, seeing opportunity where others see betrayal. Some struggle with the language, earning harsh words from impatient teachers. Daniel and his friends absorb everything with careful attention, not surrendering to it, but mastering it. Understanding that knowledge itself is neutral, it's how one uses it that matters. Months pass. Seasons change. The young exiles grow taller. Their voices deepen, their minds expand. They learn to navigate the complex social hierarchy of the Babylonian court. They discover who can be trusted and who cannot. They observe the politics, the flattery, the dangerous game of royal favor. In quiet moments when they can slip away from watchful eyes, Daniel leads his friends in prayer to their God. These stolen times of worship become anchors in the swirling currents of their new existence. In a land of countless deities, they hold to the belief that there is only one. Other Hebrew youth begin to forget Jerusalem. They adopt Babylonian ways eagerly, changing not just their clothes and speech, but their hearts. Daniel watches this transformation with sadness but not judgment. The pressure to conform crushes some spirits. Not everyone has the strength to remain other in a place that demands sameness. 2 years into their captivity, the young men have become fluent in Babylonian ways. They can write in cuneiform, recite the laws of Hammurabi, calculate the movements of celestial bodies, and discuss philosophies unknown in Jerusalem. Outwardly, they appear to be successful products of Nebuchadnezzar's assimilation program. But beneath the surface, Daniel remains Daniel, not Belteshazzar. In his heart, Jerusalem still stands. And in this duality, this ability to walk in two worlds without being consumed by either, lies the secret of his future influence. He has learned the crucial lesson of exile, adaptation without surrender. The king's table. The palace dining hall gleams with luxury. Gold plates catch the light of 100 oil lamps. Silver cups stand ready to be filled with the finest wines. Servants hover nearby, awaiting the arrival of the trainees who will one day serve the king. Daniel enters with his friends, their eyes taking in the splendor. After 3 years of preparation, they have reached an important milestone. Today they join the ranks of those who eat from the king's provisions, a sign of favor, a mark of status. Ashpenaz gestures proudly to the laden tables. The king himself has chosen these foods for you, the same dishes from his own table. There is no greater honor. The aroma of roasted meats fills the air. Bowls overflow with fruits unknown in Judah. Wine imported from distant lands glows ruby red in crystal decanters. It is a feast fit for royalty. But Daniel pauses, his mind racing. These foods, have they been offered to idols before being served? This meat, does it come from animals forbidden by the law of Moses? This wine, has it been used in libations to Babylonian gods? In the quiet of his heart, Daniel faces a moment of decision. To eat is simple. To refuse is dangerous. Many of his fellow Hebrews have already chosen the easier path, setting aside dietary restrictions as outdated customs from a homeland that grows more distant with each passing day. His three friends watch him, waiting. They have followed his lead before. Will they follow now, even if it means risk, even if it means standing out when every instinct urges them to blend in? Daniel approaches Ashpenaz with respect but determination. Please, he says, his voice low but clear, allow us not to defile ourselves with the king's food and wine. Ashpenaz's face clouds with concern. I fear my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men your age? The king would then have my head because of you. It's not a baseless fear. Nebuchadnezzar's anger is legendary. His kindness can turn to cruelty in an instant. Those who disappoint him rarely get second chances. Daniel thinks quickly. He needs a solution that protects Ashpenaz while allowing them to maintain their commitment. His mind, trained now in both Hebrew wisdom and Babylonian logic, formulates a test. He turns to the guard whom Ashpenaz has appointed over them. Please test your servants for 10 days, he proposes. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. The guard considers. 10 days is not long. If they look worse for it, the experiment ends, and no one need know. If they don't, nothing is lost. He agrees. That evening, as other trainees feast on delicacies, Daniel and his friends receive simple fare: pulse, vegetables, grains and legumes, and water. Some of the other Hebrew youth mock them quietly. Still clinging to old ways, they whisper, still pretending Jerusalem matters. Daniel doesn't argue. This choice isn't about proving others wrong or demonstrating superior piety. It's about the line each person must draw for themselves, the point beyond which compromise becomes something darker. For some, that line might be elsewhere. For Daniel, it lies here, at the king's table, where what enters the body becomes symbolic of what enters the soul. Days pass. The four friends eat their simple meals, while around them others indulge in royal abundance. They drink water while others drink wine. They work as hard as anyone in their studies, their physical training, their preparation for royal service. Ashpenaz watches them closely, looking for signs of weakness or deterioration. Instead, he sees something unexpected. Despite their plain diet, or perhaps because of it, they appear healthier than their peers. Their minds seem sharper in debates, their bodies stronger in exercises. After 10 days, the results are undeniable. Daniel and his friends look healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. The guard takes away their special food and wine and gives them vegetables instead. In the complex world of the Babylonian court, Daniel has won his first victory, not through defiance, but through wisdom. He has found a way to remain true to his convictions without forcing others to choose sides. This small moment of resistance ripples outward. Other Hebrew youth notice. Palace officials notice. A message spreads without words. It is possible to serve Babylon without surrendering everything. It is possible to succeed in a foreign system while maintaining an inner core of identity. And in this balance, this careful navigation between different worlds, Daniel begins to forge the path that will eventually lead him from captive to counselor, from student to sage. 10 days of faith. Morning light filters through high windows. Daniel rises from his sleeping mat, feeling strangely energized despite the early hour. 3 days have passed since the beginning of their vegetable diet. 7 remain in the test. His friends join him for morning prayers, a quiet ritual they maintain despite the risk. Around them, the palace stirs with activity. Servants hurry through corridors, guards change shifts. The machinery of empire grinds forward, indifferent to the small act of faith unfolding in its midst. Do you think it's working? Michel asks softly, his new name Meshach still foreign on the ears of his friends. Daniel considers before answering. I believe so, he says, but even if our appearance showed otherwise, the choice would remain the same. This is the heart of their commitment, not results, but principle. Not success, but faithfulness. They have chosen this path not to look better than others or to receive divine favor, but simply because some lines cannot be crossed without losing oneself. The day unfolds like the ones before it. Language lessons, history, astronomy, mathematics, physical training. The Babylonian education system is thorough, designed to transform foreign youths into useful servants of the empire. Knowledge flows one way from teacher to student with little room for questioning. During a midday break, Daniel notices one of the other Hebrew trainees watching him. The youth approaches hesitantly. "Is it true?" he asks. "Are you really refusing the king's food?" Daniel nods simply. "Aren't you afraid? What if you fail the test? What if you're punished?" Daniel feels no judgment toward this boy who has made different choices. "There are many ways to fear," he says gently. "We choose to fear God more than we fear what might happen." The conversation ends there, but something has been planted, a tiny seed of courage in another exile's heart. By the fifth day, changes become noticeable. While others complain of heaviness after rich meals, Daniel and his friends remain alert during afternoon lessons. While some suffer from the effects of too much wine the night before, the four water drinkers maintain clear eyes and sharp minds. Their teachers begin to remark on it. Their fellow students notice. Even palace servants observe the difference. Something unusual is happening with these four Hebrews who have chosen a different path. Behind the scenes, power struggles unfold. Some officials see Daniel's choice as subtle defiance that should be crushed. Others view it as a harmless eccentricity. Still others recognize something deeper at work, a strength of character that might prove useful to the empire. Ashpenaz finds himself increasingly drawn to these young men, whose quiet conviction makes them stand out. He has overseen the training of hundreds of foreign youths, watched them bend and break and reshape themselves to fit Babylonian molds. But these four bend without breaking, adapt without surrendering. By the seventh day, palace whispers grow. Some claim divine favor rests on the Hebrew youths. Others suggest their diet must contain secret ingredients. A few even begin to wonder if there might be power in the God of Israel that Babylon's conquests couldn't capture. Daniel himself makes no such claims. He simply continues, studying diligently, treating everyone with respect, maintaining his practices without parading them. His revolution is a quiet one, fought not with swords or shouted manifestos, but with daily choices and consistent character. On the ninth day, the guard who oversees their diet pulls Daniel aside. "Whatever your God does," he says in a hushed voice, "it works. I have never seen such transformation in such a short time." Daniel thanks him, but offers no miraculous explanations. The guard has attributed their health to divine intervention. Daniel sees no need to correct this view, but neither does he exploit it. The final day arrives. The test concludes. Daniel and his friends stand before Ashpenaz for evaluation. Their appearances are compared with those who have feasted on royal delicacies. The difference is clear to all, not just physical vitality, but a clarity of presence, an alertness of spirit. The verdict comes swiftly. "You may continue with your special diet," Ashpenaz announces. "The results speak for themselves." In that moment, something shifts in the palace dynamic. Four young exiles, through quiet persistence, have carved out space for difference within a system designed to eliminate it. They have demonstrated that one can serve effectively without surrendering completely. Word reaches Nebuchadnezzar himself, not of dietary choices, but of exceptional students among the Hebrew captives. His interest is piqued. He requests reports on their progress, and so begins the next phase of their journey. 10 days of vegetables and water, like a seemingly small decision, has set in motion events that will eventually place them before the most powerful man in the world. As evening falls on the 10th day, Daniel gathers with his friends in their quarters. "This was not about us," he reminds them. "This was about remembering who we are and whom we serve, even in exile." They nod in agreement. The test is over, but their true testing has only begun. Dreams and deadlines. Night shrouds Babylon. In the royal palace, King Nebuchadnezzar tosses on his gold-threaded sheets. Sleep eludes him. When it finally comes, strange visions flood his mind. Images of power and destruction, of gleaming metal and crushing stone. He wakes with a start, heart pounding, sweat beading on his forehead. Morning arrives. The king sits brooding on his throne. Something about the dream disturbs him deeply. Not just its content, but its feeling of importance, of prophecy. He must know its meaning. Bring me the wise men, he commands. Bring me the magicians and enchanters, the astrologers and diviners. They must tell me what I have dreamed. Throughout the palace complex, the summons spreads. Wise men gather their scrolls and instruments. Diviners consult their omens. Astrologers check celestial charts. They have interpreted dreams before. It is a common request from the king, who believes strongly in night visions as messages from the gods. They enter the throne room and bow low before Nebuchadnezzar. The king looks down at them, his expression unreadable. "I have had a dream that troubles me," he announces. "Now tell me what it means." The chief astrologer steps forward, confident in his training and position. "Tell us the dream, O king, and we will interpret it for you." Silence falls. Nebuchadnezzar's eyes narrow. "The command from me is firm," he says, his voice dangerously soft. "You must tell me the dream itself and then its interpretation. If you do not, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble." Shock ripples through the assembled wise men. This is unprecedented. Dreams come from the dreamer. Interpretations come from the interpreters. For the king to demand they tell him what he dreamed, it's impossible. It's madness. "There is no man on earth who can do what the king asks," the chief astrologer protests. "No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer." Nebuchadnezzar rises from his throne, rage building. "You stall for time. You speak empty words. If you cannot tell me my dream, there is only one decree for you. You are nothing but frauds, feeding off royal favor without true power or knowledge." The wise men exchange terrified glances. They have built careers, lives, identities around their claimed abilities. Now they face a test they cannot possibly pass, not through skill or trickery or persuasion. The king's decision comes swiftly. "Execute them all," he commands his guards. "Every wise man in Babylon has failed me. None shall be spared." The decree goes out. Guards fan across the city seeking out anyone with the title of wise man, magician, enchanter, or astrologer. Terror spreads through the learned class of Babylon. A death sentence hangs over the heads of hundreds, based on the impossible demand of one man. In the quarters where Daniel and his friends continue their studies, a royal guard appears. "You too are to be executed," he announces flatly. "The king has ordered all wise men put to death." Daniel looks up from his scrolls, confused. "Why has the king issued so harsh a decree?" The guard explains the situation, the dream, the demand, the death sentence. Daniel listens carefully, his mind working quickly. Unlike the Babylonian wise men who have studied their arts for decades, he and his friends are still students. Yet they too fall under the royal command. Where others see only crisis, Daniel sees opportunity. "May I speak with the king?" he asks the guard. The request seems absurd. Who is this Hebrew youth to seek audience with Nebuchadnezzar in his rage? Yet something in Daniel's calm confidence gives the guard pause. Strange rumors have circulated about these particular captives. Their unusual diet, their exceptional progress, their peculiar devotion to their invisible God. "I will see what can be arranged," the guard finally says. Daniel returns to his friends. "We need time," he tells them, "and we need help beyond our own understanding." They gather to pray, these 4 young men facing death in a foreign land. Their petition is simple but urgent, that the God who brought them into exile might now reveal to them this mystery. Meanwhile, the administrative machinery of execution grinds forward. Lists are made. Prisoners are gathered. The royal executioner prepares his tools. The wise men of Babylon, once revered, now revealed as powerless, await their fate. Through palace connections and divine timing, Daniel secures his audience with the king. He enters the throne room and bows deeply. "O king, if you give me time, I will tell you what you dreamed and what it means." Nebuchadnezzar studies this young Hebrew. Reports have reached him of exceptional students among the captives, but he has not personally met them until now. Something about Daniel's confidence intrigues him. "You believe your God can reveal this to you?" he asks, half skeptical, half hopeful. "There is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries," Daniel answers simply. "He has shown concern for your future, O king, by giving you this dream. Perhaps it's desperation. Perhaps it's curiosity. Perhaps it's that small voice of conscience whispering that mass execution might be an overreaction." Whatever the reason, Nebuchadnezzar grants Daniel's request for time. Daniel returns to his friends with the news. They have been given one night. One night to discover what no human could possibly know through normal means. One night to save not only themselves, but all the wise men of Babylon. Their prayer that night takes on new urgency. No ritualistic repetition of familiar words, but the raw cry of those whose lives hang in the balance. They pray not just as Hebrews maintaining tradition, but as humans facing mortality. And in the dark hours before dawn, the mystery is revealed to Daniel in a vision. He sees what the king saw. He understands what it means. Divine light breaks through human impossibility. Morning comes. The executioners wait. The wise men prepare for death. The king demands answers. And Daniel, young, foreign, captive Daniel, prepares to speak words that will change the course of an empire. The mystery revealed. First light touches the ziggurats of Babylon. Daniel hasn't slept. The vision came to him in the night hours, clear, unmistakable, overwhelming. Now he kneels in gratitude, words of praise flowing from his lips. "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever," he whispers. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. His friends gather around him, their faces questioning. Has the answer come? Has their prayer been answered? Daniel nods, his expression both relieved and solemn. What he has seen is no small thing. Not just the content of a dream, but a glimpse into the future of kingdoms and powers. "We must go to the king," he says simply. The palace buzzes with grim activity. Preparations for mass executions continue. Wise men await their fate in chambers that once hosted their scholarly debates. Guards move with purpose, carrying out what they believe to be the king's irreversible command. Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, looks up in surprise as Daniel approaches. "I thought you would be hiding," he says bluntly. "The time granted by the king has nearly expired." "Do not execute the wise men," Daniel replies. "Take me to the king, and I will interpret his dream." Arioch hesitates only briefly before escorting Daniel through the palace corridors. Self-interest motivates him as much as mercy. Success in this matter could mean royal favor, while failure merely returns them to the original plan. They enter the throne room together. Nebuchadnezzar sits in shadow, his face haggard from poor sleep and dark thoughts. When he sees the Hebrew youth, a spark of interest breaks through his brooding. "Are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it?" the king demands without preamble. Daniel stands straight but speaks with humility. No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about, he begins truthfully. Nebuchadnezzar's expression darkens, but Daniel continues, "But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries." The king leans forward slightly, his interest caught. "He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come," Daniel continues. "Your dream and the visions that pass through your mind as you lay on your bed are these." Daniel pauses, gathering himself for what comes next. The room falls completely silent. Court officials hold their breath. Guards stand motionless. The king's eyes never leave Daniel's face. "You looked, O king, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance." Nebuchadnezzar's eyes widen in shock. This is indeed what he saw. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. With each detail, the king's amazement grows. This young Hebrew has done the impossible. He has seen what only the king and his gods should know. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all broken to pieces and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. Daniel pauses, letting the description sink in. The dream itself is now revealed, exactly as Nebuchadnezzar experienced it. But the meaning, the interpretation, this is where divine wisdom must shine brightest. "This was the dream," Daniel confirms. "Now we will interpret it for the king." Nebuchadnezzar sits perfectly still, all rage forgotten, all skepticism swept away. Something profound is happening in his throne room, something beyond the usual politics and power plays of court life. You, O king, are the King of Kings, Daniel begins. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. He has placed mankind and the animals of the field under your control. Wherever they live, he has made you ruler over them all. You are that head of gold. Pride fills the king's face at these words. His empire, his accomplishments, recognized not just by men, but apparently by the God of heaven himself. But Daniel continues, and the message becomes less flattering. After you, another kingdom will arise, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron. For iron breaks and smashes everything, and as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. The king's expression grows troubled. His empire will not last forever. Other kingdoms will follow. His golden legacy will give way to silver, bronze, iron. Daniel describes the final phase of the dream statue. Feet and toes of mixed iron and clay, representing a divided kingdom, partly strong and partly brittle. And then comes the mysterious stone, cut not by human hands, that destroys the statue and becomes a mountain filling the earth. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. Daniel's voice grows stronger as he concludes. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands. A rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true, and its interpretation is trustworthy. Silence falls again. No one dares speak. The king sits motionless, absorbing what he has heard, a message both flattering and humbling, recognizing his greatness while placing clear limits on it. Then, to everyone's amazement, Nebuchadnezzar slides from his throne and falls prostrate before Daniel, the king of the world's greatest empire, bowing before a captive youth. Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, Nebuchadnezzar declares, his voice filled with awe. No other God could have revealed this secret. In that moment, power shifts. Daniel stands not as prisoner, but as prophet. The wise men of Babylon are saved, and a seed is planted in Nebuchadnezzar's mind, a first glimpse that perhaps his own gods, his own power, his own empire are not the final word in history. For Daniel, this moment confirms what he has always believed, that the God of Israel remains sovereign even in exile, even in Babylon. The future may hold more kingdoms and empires, rises and falls, but above all, human striving sits the Ancient of Days, working out purposes beyond mortal understanding. The prophecy has been delivered, the immediate crisis has passed, but the implications of this dream will echo through centuries to come. The Statue of Empires. Sunlight streams through high windows in the royal chamber where Nebuchadnezzar meets with his advisors. Daniel stands at the center of attention, no longer just a promising student, but now recognized as something far more, a vessel for divine revelation. Explain it again, the king commands, his voice thoughtful rather than threatening. This progression of kingdoms, this stone that destroys them all. Daniel nods, understanding the king's need to grasp fully what has been revealed. Dreams fade quickly upon waking, but interpretations can be examined, questioned, contemplated. The statue represents the sequence of empires that will shape the known world, Daniel begins. Your kingdom, Babylon, is the head of gold, the most splendid, the most valuable. Nebuchadnezzar nods with satisfaction. This part pleases him greatly. After you will rise another kingdom inferior to yours, represented by the chest and arms of silver. Daniel continues carefully, aware that no ruler wishes to hear of his empire's eventual replacement. Silver, muses the king, valuable but less so than gold. Who could this be? Court scholars exchange glances. Some suspect the rising power of the Medes and Persians to the east. Others wonder if Egypt might regain its former glory. None dare speculate too loudly. Following this silver empire, Daniel continues, a third kingdom of bronze will arise to rule the earth, and after that a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, breaking and crushing all opposition. The progression darkens, gold to silver to bronze to iron, value decreasing while strength increases, something profound about human history captured in metal. And the mixed iron and clay of the feet and toes? Asks one court astrologer, unable to contain his curiosity. A divided kingdom, Daniel replies, partly strong, partly brittle. Though the people will try to strengthen themselves through alliances, they will not remain united. The assembled advisors ponder this strange future, empires rising and falling like waves on a shore, each believing itself permanent, each eventually replaced. But it's the stone that most intrigues Nebuchadnezzar. Tell me again of this rock not cut by human hands, he demands, the one that destroys all earthly kingdoms and fills the earth. Daniel chooses his words with special care. In the time of those final kings, the God of heaven will establish a kingdom that will never be destroyed or given to another people. It will crush all previous kingdoms and will itself endure forever. Whispers ripple through the gathering. Is he speaking of a literal kingdom? A spiritual one? Does he mean the God of Israel will visibly rule, or is this symbolic language? Nebuchadnezzar rises from his seat and walks to a window overlooking his city. Babylon stretches before him, the greatest civilization humans have built, the pinnacle of achievement, the center of the world. Yet according to this Hebrew seer, it is merely the first in a sequence, destined to fall. You speak of my empire as temporary, he says, not turning from the window, yet it feels very solid beneath my feet. All human kingdoms are temporary, O king, Daniel replies gently. Only what is established by the God of heaven endures forever. In this exchange lies a tension that will follow Daniel throughout his life, the prophet of eternity living amid temporal power, speaking timeless truth to those consumed by immediate glory. Nebuchadnezzar turns back to face the gathering. Whatever philosophical doubts the dream has raised, there is a practical reality before him. This young Hebrew has demonstrated access to knowledge no human could possess without divine help. The dream and its meaning come not from my wisdom, Daniel reminds the court, but from the God who reveals mysteries. Days pass as news of the strange vision spreads through palace circles. Scholars debate its significance. Military leaders worry about mentioned future kingdoms. Religious officials feel threatened by this foreign god who apparently speaks through dreams. For Daniel, the revelation brings both validation and burden. To be shown the sweep of future history, kingdoms rising and falling while God's purposes unfold, places him in a unique position. He has glimpsed time from above, seen the pattern in the chaos. Many seek private audiences with him now, hoping for insights into personal futures or political advantages. Daniel declines these requests gently. His gift is not for personal gain or political maneuvering. Meanwhile, Nebuchadnezzar's mood shifts between wonder and worry. The dream has shaken his sense of permanence. If Babylon is merely the first kingdom in a sequence, what does that mean for his legacy? If some mysterious stone kingdom will eventually sweep away all human empires, why build it all? The king summons Daniel again, this time alone. These kingdoms that come after mine, he asks, can you tell me more about them? When will they arise? How long will each last? Daniel shakes his head. Such details were not revealed to me, O king. The vision showed the pattern, not the precise timing. Nebuchadnezzar paces his chamber, troubled. And this stone kingdom that destroys all others, is it an enemy I should prepare for? A threat to my sons and grandsons? It is not a kingdom that can be fought with swords or resisted with walls, Daniel explains. When it comes, it will be established by God himself, not by human effort or conquest. The king stops pacing and looks directly at Daniel. Your God, does he wish to overthrow me? This question reveals the heart of Nebuchadnezzar's concern. Like all rulers, he sees challenges primarily as threats to power. The God of heaven gave you your kingdom, O king, Daniel answers carefully. The dream acknowledges your greatness while reminding all rulers that kingdoms rise and fall according to his purposes. This answer seems to satisfy Nebuchadnezzar for the moment. The dream has revealed both his significance and his limits, a difficult tension for any ruler to hold. In the weeks that follow, the immediate crisis fades. The wise men of Babylon return to their duties, sobered by their brush with death. Court life resumes its rhythms. The dream becomes another tale told in palace corridors, its urgency diminishing with time. Yet something has changed permanently. A Hebrew exile has spoken truth to the most powerful man on earth. A captive has interpreted what no native sage could grasp. And through this unlikely channel, The sovereign God of Israel has announced to Babylon that history moves toward his purposes, not merely human ambitions. The statue of empires stands tall in the imagination of those who heard Daniel's interpretation. Gold fading to silver, silver yielding to bronze, bronze giving way to iron, iron mixing with clay, and always at the end, the stone not cut by human hands growing to fill the earth. For those with eyes to see, a new understanding dawns. Empires are temporary, but purpose is eternal. Power shifts, but truth remains. Babylon now, others later, but ultimately something else entirely, the kingdom of God that will never end. Promotion and loyalty. The royal herald's voice carries across the palace courtyard. By decree of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, ruler of nations, favorite of the gods, let it be known that the Hebrew Daniel, also called Belteshazzar, is hereby appointed ruler over the entire province of Babylon and chief of all its wise men. Officials gather to witness the ceremony. Some watch with admiration, others with barely concealed envy. A foreign youth elevated above native Babylonians. It's unprecedented. Yet none dare question the king's decision openly. Daniel kneels before Nebuchadnezzar, who places a heavy gold chain around his neck. "You have proven yourself wiser than all my counselors," the king declares. "Your God has given you insight no other possesses. From this day you will govern the province and oversee those who once taught you." The promotion is stunning in its scope. In just a few years, Daniel has risen from captive to ruler, from student to chief administrator. The province of Babylon is the heart of the empire. Controlling it means controlling the flow of wealth, justice, and information throughout the capital region. Daniel accepts with appropriate gratitude, yet inwardly he understands the precarious nature of royal favor. Today's honored advisor can become tomorrow's forgotten servant, or worse, tomorrow's enemy. Power in Babylon shifts like desert sands. "I have one request, O king," Daniel says, rising to his feet. Nebuchadnezzar nods permission to speak. "My 3 friends who came with me from Jerusalem, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they too have served faithfully in their training. Might they be given responsibilities in the administration of the province?" The king studies Daniel's face, noting the loyalty to friends rather than hunger for exclusive power. This, too, marks the Hebrew as different from the usual court climbers. "So be it," Nebuchadnezzar agrees. "They shall serve as administrators under your authority." And so the 4 friends who once huddled together as frightened captives now find themselves governing the very empire that conquered their homeland. They meet privately that evening, away from listening ears, to make sense of this strange turn of events. "We must remember why we're here," Daniel reminds them, "not for power or wealth, but to serve both our God and this king with integrity." Hananiah, now known as Shadrach, nods thoughtfully. "We walk a narrow path, loyal to Babylon without betraying Jerusalem, serving Nebuchadnezzar without compromising our faith." "The real test is just beginning," adds Mishael, called Meshach. "Until now, we've been students. Now our decisions affect thousands." Azariah, renamed Abednego, speaks last. "Daniel, you stand closest to the king. Your position is most visible and most dangerous." Daniel acknowledges this truth. Proximity to power brings both opportunity and risk. Every word he speaks, every piece of advice he gives will have consequences, and the line between counseling a king and enabling a despot can blur easily. In the days that follow, the 4 friends establish a pattern that will guide their administration. Fairness to all regardless of nationality or status, refusal of bribes, regular consultation with each other, and private prayer to the God who brought them to these positions. Not everyone appreciates their approach. Some Babylonian officials resent taking orders from foreigners. Merchants accustomed to buying favors find their bribes rejected. Those who previously enjoyed special treatment discover that standards now apply equally to all. Whispers begin in dark corners. These Hebrews think themselves better than true Babylonians. They meet in secret, perhaps to plot against the king. They refuse to fully embrace our ways, yet they govern us. Daniel hears these murmurs, but continues his work with quiet diligence. He knows that excellence is the best defense against accusation, integrity the strongest shield against intrigue. Meanwhile, Nebuchadnezzar watches his unusual appointee with growing respect. Unlike other officials who flatter and scheme, Daniel speaks truth regardless of consequences. Unlike counselors who offer advice based on political calculations, Daniel provides insight based on principle and wisdom. From his position as chief administrator, Daniel works to improve conditions for his fellow exiles without showing improper favoritism. He ensures that Hebrew communities can maintain their customs while still functioning within Babylonian society. He creates spaces where multiple cultures can coexist without forced assimilation. His friends follow his example in their areas of responsibility. Together, they demonstrate that power can be held without being corrupted by it, that authority can be exercised with both firmness and compassion. Months pass. Their administration earns grudging respect even from critics. The province operates more efficiently, more justly, more peacefully than before. Tax collection becomes fair rather than predatory. Disputes are settled according to evidence rather than influence. Corruption diminishes. Then comes the announcement that shakes the capital. Nebuchadnezzar plans to erect a massive golden statue on the plain of Dura, 90 feet tall, 9 feet wide, covered in precious metal that gleams under the Mesopotamian sun. A monument to Babylonian glory, to the king's power, perhaps even to the king himself. Daniel, involved in matters of state administration, is away on royal business when construction begins. His three friends watch the massive idol take shape with growing concern. They sense that something more than a building project is unfolding, something that will test their careful balance between serving Babylon and honoring their God. Their fears prove justified when the royal decree arrives. At the statue's dedication, when music plays, every official of the empire must fall down and worship the golden image. Anyone who refuses will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. The three friends meet in private, anguish evident on their faces. For years they have served loyally, found ways to honor both king and God. But now a line has been drawn that cannot be crossed. To bow before an idol, any idol, would violate the core of their faith. Azariah speaks first. Daniel is away. We must decide without his counsel. Mishael nods gravely. This is not like the food from the king's table. This is not a matter of interpretation or personal practice. This is worship, something given only to the Lord. Hananiah looks at his friends, his expression resolute. Then we do not bow, regardless of consequences. In that moment of decision, something crystallizes in their shared understanding. Compromise has limits. Accommodation has boundaries. Some lines cannot be crossed even at the cost of position, favor, or life itself. The day of dedication arrives. Officials gather from across the empire, governors, prefects, magistrates, counselors, treasurers, judges. The golden statue towers above the plain, visible for miles around. At its base, the furnace burns hot, a visible reminder of the price of disobedience. Daniel's three friends take their places among the crowd of officials. They have made no public declaration of their intentions. They have sought no special exemption. They have simply decided, in the quiet of their hearts, that some loyalties transcend even the most powerful human authority. As the sun reaches its zenith, the heralds announce the king's decree once more. When the music sounds, all must fall down and worship. The penalty for refusal remains the same, immediate death in the furnace. The instruments begin to play. Across the plain of Dura, thousands of officials prostrate themselves before the golden image. Only three remain standing. Three figures who have decided that their ultimate loyalty lies elsewhere. And in that moment of quiet defiance, with the music still playing and flames leaping from the furnace nearby, a new chapter in their story begins. The fiery furnace. Heat waves shimmer above the plain of Dura. The assembled officials rise from their position of worship, brushing dust from elaborate robes. Then the whispers begin, spreading like fire through dry grass. Look there, the Jews, they didn't bow. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stand motionless, their faces calm but resolute. They have known this moment might come from the day they refused the king's food years ago. Every small act of faithful resistance has prepared them for this larger one. The whispers reach certain Chaldean officials who have long resented the Hebrews' position. Here at last is their opportunity. They hurry to Nebuchadnezzar, faces arranged in expressions of shocked concern. "O king, live forever," they begin with the customary greeting. "You issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of music must fall down and worship the golden image, and whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace." Nebuchadnezzar nods impatiently. He knows what he decreed. There are certain Jews whom you have set over the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men pay no attention to you, O king. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image you have set up. The accusation hangs in the hot air. The king's expression darkens like a gathering storm. These three have received positions of honor. They have been elevated above many native Babylonians. And now they publicly defy him? Bring them to me, he commands, voice tight with anger. Guards move through the crowd, which parts quickly to reveal the three Hebrews. They are escorted before Nebuchadnezzar, who studies them with narrowed eyes. Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image I have set up? The king's voice holds a note of disbelief along with anger. He has favored these young men, recognized their abilities, rewarded their service. Perhaps he thinks there has been some misunderstanding. Perhaps they failed to hear the music. Perhaps they were distracted by administrative matters. Surely they would not deliberately disobey. So he offers them a second chance, an unusual mercy from a king not known for patience. Now, when you hear the music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I have made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? The threat is clear, but so is the opportunity. Bow now, and all will be forgiven. Their positions will remain secure. Their lives will continue. One simple gesture of compliance, that's all that stands between them and safety. The crowd waits breathlessly for their answer. Some hope to see these foreigners humbled at last. Others, who have benefited from their fair administration, silently pray they will choose the practical path of survival. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego exchange glances. In that brief moment, years of shared faith pass between them. Memories of prayers in Jerusalem, of quiet worship in Babylon, of countless small decisions that have led to this large one. When they speak, they do so with one voice, addressing the most powerful man in the world with respect but without fear. O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. The crowd gasps at their boldness. No one speaks to the king this way. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. They pause, then add words that echo across the plain and through centuries to come. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. The simplicity of their answer masks its revolutionary nature. They acknowledge God's power to save, but make clear their obedience doesn't depend on rescue. Their faith isn't transactional, it's relational, rooted in loyalty to the God who remains faithful even when physical deliverance doesn't come. Nebuchadnezzar's face contorts with rage. He has offered mercy and been refused. He has extended a second chance and been rebuffed. Now his fury knows no bounds. Heat the furnace 7 times hotter than usual, he shouts to his servants. The command is more emotional than practical. Furnaces have physical limits, but it communicates his extreme anger. Workers rush to obey, stoking the flames until the furnace roars like a living thing. Its heat so intense that approaching it becomes dangerous. The king then orders his strongest soldiers to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the fire. The soldiers wrap ropes around the 3 friends, binding their hands and feet. There is no resistance, no struggle. The Hebrews remain calm, even as they are lifted and carried toward the furnace door. So great is the heat that several soldiers die just from approaching the furnace to throw in their prisoners. Their bodies fall alongside the bound Hebrews as flames engulf them all. Nebuchadnezzar watches with savage satisfaction. His authority has been challenged, but now his power is reestablished through fire. Let all who witness this remember the price of defiance. But something is wrong. The king leans forward, squinting at the heart of the inferno. His expression shifts from satisfaction to confusion, then to shock. Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? He demands of his advisors. They nod nervously, unsure where this is leading. Look! Nebuchadnezzar points toward the furnace. I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods. The king rushes as close to the furnace as the heat allows. Inside, clearly visible through the flames, 4 figures move freely. The ropes that bound the three friends have burned away, but their bodies and even their clothes remain untouched by fire. And with them walks someone else, someone whose appearance causes even Nebuchadnezzar to use the language of divinity. The king's voice trembles as he calls out, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here!" The three men walk out of the fire, passing through flames that had killed soldiers moments before. Officials crowd around them in disbelief. Their hair is not singed, their robes are not scorched. There isn't even the smell of fire on them. Only the ropes that bound them have been consumed. In that moment, something changes in Nebuchadnezzar. The rage drains from his face. Awe replaces anger. He has witnessed something beyond his understanding, something that challenges everything he believes about power and gods and who truly rules the world. A fourth in the fire. Silence blankets the plain of Dura. The golden statue, moments ago the center of attention, stands forgotten. All eyes focus on three men who should be dead, but instead stand whole and unharmed before the king. Nebuchadnezzar's voice breaks the silence, carrying across the hushed gathering. Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. The words seem torn from him, not the calculated statement of a politician, but the spontaneous response of a man confronted with the inexplicable. He continues, his voice growing stronger. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. The crowd listens in stunned silence. This is Nebuchadnezzar, builder of Babylon, conqueror of nations, self-proclaimed favorite of the gods, speaking with reverence about the God of three foreign captives. The king is not finished. What follows transforms the day's events from personal miracle to public policy. Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces, and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way. The decree sweeps across the assembly like a desert wind. The God of Israel, a supposedly defeated deity whose temple lies in ruins in Jerusalem, now receives official protection throughout the Babylonian Empire. The God of the conquered will be respected by the conquerors. Nebuchadnezzar turns to the three friends, studying them with new eyes. Your God protected you because you remained faithful to him, he acknowledges. Then, in a final display of how completely the day's events have reversed expectations, he promotes them to even higher positions in the province of Babylon. As the assembly disperses, whispered conversations spring up everywhere. Did you see it? 4 figures in the fire, not even the smell of smoke on their clothes. Who was the 4th one? This last question echoes most persistently. Who or what was the 4th figure in the flames? An angel, as Nebuchadnezzar suggested? A divine manifestation? Another form of the Hebrew God? For the 3 friends, the identity of their companion in the fire is less important than what his presence represented. Divine faithfulness meeting human faithfulness. They had declared their loyalty to God regardless of outcome, and God had declared his loyalty to them in their moment of greatest need. That evening, in the privacy of their quarters, the 3 gather to process what has happened. Their bodies bear no marks from the furnace, but their souls carry the imprint of their experience. He was there with us, Hananiah says softly. In our worst moment, we were not alone. Mishael nods. The flames were all around us, but they couldn't touch us. It was like standing in a cool breeze. I wasn't afraid, adds Azariah. Even when they were binding us, I felt peace, as if whatever happened next was exactly what should happen. They speak quietly of their experience, trying to find words for something beyond language. How does one describe standing in fire but feeling embraced rather than consumed? How does one explain looking into flames and finding presence rather than pain? Meanwhile, word spreads throughout Babylon and beyond. The story grows with each telling. The golden statue, the music, the refusal to bow, the furnace heated 7 times hot, the miraculous survival, the 4th figure, the king's dramatic change of heart. For the Jewish communities in exile, the tale becomes a beacon of hope. Their God has not abandoned them in Babylon. Their faith is not irrelevant in this foreign land. Their strange dietary restrictions, their Sabbath observances, their prayers toward Jerusalem, these are not empty rituals. but expressions of a relationship with the living God who enters fires to be with his people. In the royal palace, Nebuchadnezzar finds himself unable to sleep. The image of four figures walking untouched through flames haunts him. His world has been built on certain assumptions. That might makes right, that gods serve kings rather than the reverse, that heavenly power flows through earthly authority. Those assumptions now lie in ruins, like chaff blown away by wind. He has glimpsed something that both attracts and frightens him, a God who cannot be controlled or manipulated, who shows allegiance to faithful servants rather than powerful rulers. By morning, messengers ride toward the empire's provinces, carrying the king's new decree. The God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is to be respected throughout Babylonian territories. No one may speak against this God who saves in ways no other can. For the three friends, life gradually returns to a new normal. They resume their administrative duties, perhaps with greater awareness of divine presence in ordinary moments. Having experienced God in the extreme circumstance of the furnace, they now recognize him in the quiet routines of daily work. Daniel returns from his journey to discover his friends elevated in position and esteem, their stories spreading throughout the empire. He listens to their account with quiet amazement, grateful for their preservation, but perhaps not entirely surprised. He has seen enough of God's work in Babylon to know that exile does not mean abandonment. Together, the four friends continue their unlikely journey. Captives who became counselors, foreigners who became officials, faithful Jews who serve a pagan king while remaining true to their God. And in hearts and homes throughout the empire, a question continues to echo: who was the fourth in the fire? What does it mean when the divine steps into the flames of human suffering and stands beside those who remain faithful? It's a question that will reverberate through centuries to come, finding its ultimate answer in another story of divine presence amid human pain, a presence that transforms the very nature of suffering itself. But that revelation lies in the future. For now, in Babylon, the miracle of the furnace serves as a sign that the God of Israel is not confined to Jerusalem, that faithfulness matters more than success, and that divine presence can turn the hottest furnace into holy ground. The king's madness. In the gleaming halls of Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar stood at the pinnacle of his power. The hanging gardens bloomed under his command, and the ziggurat temple reached toward heaven like a stairway built by human hands. His empire stretched across the known world, a testament to conquest and ambition fulfilled. Is this not magnificent Babylon, which I have built as my royal home by my vast power and for my glorious majesty? He asked the empty air from his palace rooftop. The words had barely left his lips when something strange began to happen. A voice from heaven answered his boast with a simple decree. The kingdom would be taken from him until he learned that true power comes from above, not from human hands. Nebuchadnezzar's mind began to slip away. The transformation wasn't instant, but it was complete. Court whispers tell of the king's eyes growing wild, his speech becoming nonsense. The ruler of the known world started to shed his royal robes, preferring the feel of grass and dirt against his skin. Daniel, now a trusted advisor, could only watch as the prophecy he had warned about came true. The king who had once thrown 3 Hebrew youths into a furnace now crawled on all fours. The man who had demanded worship now ate grass like cattle. His hair grew long like eagle's feathers, his nails curved like bird claws. For 7 seasons, the mighty king lived among the beasts of the field. Rain fell on his shoulders where royal purple had once draped. The court kept his condition secret, hiding the truth behind palace walls. Official business continued in his name, while regents managed the daily affairs of state. Daniel remained faithful during this strange interlude. He understood what few others could see. This wasn't just madness, but a divine lesson in humility. The king who claimed godlike power was learning firsthand how quickly human dignity can vanish. The fields and wilderness became Nebuchadnezzar's home. The wild spaces that surrounded cultivated Babylon became his kingdom. Stars formed his ceiling, dirt his bed. Through summer heat and winter chill, the former king lived as something less than human, but perhaps in time, becoming more than he had been before. Some Babylonians whispered that their king had been cursed by foreign gods. Others believed he had been possessed by demons that made him howl at the moon. Few understood the truth that Daniel knew. Sometimes, wisdom only comes through loss. Sometimes we must be brought low before we can truly look up. And so the mighty king of Babylon, builder of wonders and conqueror of nations, learned the hard way that all crowns eventually fall. All power has its source, and all pride meets its match. In the quiet moments between sanity and madness, perhaps he glimpsed truths that had eluded him from the throne. The king who ate grass. The transformation of Nebuchadnezzar shocked the royal court. Guards who once bowed before him now watched from a distance as he crawled through palace gardens. Servants who trembled at his voice now whispered about the strange animal-like sounds he made. The king's fingernails grew curved and thick like talons. His once groomed beard became a tangled mess reaching down his chest. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. Seasons changed while the king remained lost in his altered state. Spring rains soaked him, summer sun burned his skin, autumn winds chilled him, and winter frost covered his makeshift beds of leaves and grass. Through it all, he lived like a wild ox, grazing on grass and sleeping under open sky. The palace officials created stories to explain his absence. Some claimed the king was on a spiritual retreat communing with the gods. Others spread rumors of a secret military campaign. Daniel knew better, but kept his counsel, watching and waiting for the divine timetable to unfold. What happens in the mind of a man who loses himself? Did Nebuchadnezzar's thoughts remain somewhere deep inside, trapped and aware, or did his consciousness shift entirely, becoming something primal and simple? The biblical account doesn't tell us the details of his inner life during these strange days. It only tells us that eventually his sanity returned. The moment came without warning. After 7 seasons of madness, Nebuchadnezzar lifted his eyes toward heaven. Something shifted in his gaze. The wild, vacant look faded. Recognition dawned. The king who ate grass remembered he was a man, not a beast. Blessed be the Most High were his first coherent words in years. His dominion is eternal, and all the peoples of the earth are nothing compared to him. The court rejoiced at the king's return to sanity. His advisors and nobles came to him cautiously at first, then with growing confidence as they recognized the old intelligence in his eyes. They helped clean him, cut his matted hair, trim his overgrown nails, and dress him once again in royal robes. The king returned to his throne changed. The arrogance that had marked his earlier reign was tempered by humility. The man who had demanded worship now acknowledged a higher power. His proclamations now carried a different tone, one of a man who had walked through fire and emerged with newfound wisdom. Daniel watched this transformation with quiet satisfaction. The prophet had warned of coming judgment, but had also promised restoration. Now both had come to pass exactly as foretold. The king, who once threatened death to those who couldn't interpret his dreams, now publicly praised the God of the Hebrews. Nebuchadnezzar's final years were marked by this new perspective. The empire continued to thrive under his leadership, but his approach to power had fundamentally changed. The king who had been humbled now ruled with a gentler hand, aware that his crown was merely borrowed from a higher authority. A new regime. Time flows like the Euphrates through Babylon, sweeping away even the greatest of kings. Nebuchadnezzar, once mad, then restored, eventually faced the one enemy no ruler escapes. Death came for him as it comes for all, and his son, evil Merodach, took the throne. But the dynasty's foundations had begun to crack. Years passed. Kings rose and fell. Palace intrigues and assassinations weakened the once mighty empire from within. By the time Belshazzar claimed the throne, Babylon was a shadow of its former glory. The city's walls still stood impressive and seemingly impenetrable, but the heart of the empire had grown soft. Belshazzar lacked his grandfather's majesty and vision. Where Nebuchadnezzar built, Belshazzar merely inherited. Where the older king had learned humility through suffering, the younger never bothered to learn the lesson. He preferred wine to wisdom, parties to prudence. Daniel, now an old man with a lifetime at court, found himself increasingly sidelined. The new king had little use for elderly advisors, especially ones associated with foreign gods and old-fashioned values. The prophet, who had once stood at the right hand of power, now lived quietly on the margins of royal life. Outside the city walls, a new threat gathered strength. The Persians under Cyrus had been consolidating power for years, swallowing smaller kingdoms and building an army that made even Babylon nervous. Whispers of their approach reached the city, but Belshazzar dismissed such concerns. Wasn't Babylon impregnable? Didn't the mighty Euphrates protect one side while massive walls guarded the others? On palace walls, paintings depicted Nebuchadnezzar's former glory. In treasury rooms, gold vessels taken from conquered temples gathered dust. Among these were the sacred items looted from Jerusalem's temple decades earlier, cups and bowls once used in worship of the Hebrew god. Belshazzar knew the stories of his grandfather's madness and restoration. He had heard tales of the Hebrew god who humbled the mighty Nebuchadnezzar. But such stories felt distant, like legends from another age. The young king preferred immediate pleasures to ancient warnings. The night that changed everything began like many others in Belshazzar's court, with wine flowing freely and music filling marble halls. The king, perhaps feeling particularly bold or particularly insecure as Persian armies camped beyond the horizon, made a fateful decision. He would use the sacred vessels from Jerusalem's temple as common drinking cups at his feast. Servants hurried to obey, bringing gold and silver vessels that had once held offerings to the God of Israel. Wine soon filled these holy containers, as drunk nobles laughed and toasted their gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. As the night wore on, no one noticed subtle changes in the city's defenses. No one detected the altering of the river's flow. No one suspected that this night of revelry would be Babylon's last as a free city. And certainly, no one expected what happened next on the plastered wall of the king's banquet hall. The writing on the wall. The feast had reached its peak when it happened. Torchlight danced across the banquet hall, casting long shadows behind drunken guests. Musicians plucked harps and beat drums while dancers twirled between tables laden with exotic foods. Belshazzar, wine cup in hand, was mid-laugh when his face suddenly froze, his eyes fixed on something beyond the dancers. Color drained from his cheeks. The cup slipped from his fingers, spilling sacred wine across the floor. Conversations died as heads turned to follow the king's gaze. There on the wall, floating above the golden sconces, a disembodied hand appeared. No arm, no body, just fingers moving with purpose across the plaster. The mysterious hand wrote strange words that glowed with an inner light. Mene, Mene, Tekel, a parson. The music stopped. A woman screamed. The king's knees began to knock together, his legs too weak to support him. "Bring the enchanters," he shouted, his voice cracking with fear. "Bring the astrologers and diviners. Whoever reads this writing and tells me what it means will be clothed in purple, have a gold chain placed around his neck, and be made the third highest ruler in the kingdom." Babylon's wisest men filed into the hall, their faces grave as they studied the glowing script. Hours passed. The party lay in ruins around them, food growing cold, wine untouched. None could decipher the message that had appeared like fire on the wall. The king grew more desperate with each failure. The queen mother, hearing the commotion, entered the hall. Older and wiser than her son, she remembered what he had forgotten. "There is a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods in him," she told Belshazzar. "In the time of your father, he was found to have insight and intelligence and wisdom like that of the gods." She spoke of Daniel, now an old man but still sharp of mind and spirit. The prophet had been largely forgotten by the current regime, pushed aside as a relic of the previous king's superstitions. But desperate times call for desperate measures. Guards were sent to fetch the aged Hebrew. Daniel came slowly, his steps measured but his back still straight despite his years. The banquet hall fell silent as he entered. Here was a living connection to Nebuchadnezzar's reign, a man who had seen Babylon in its true glory days. "Are you Daniel, one of the exiles my father brought from Judah?" Belshazzar asked, trying to sound regal despite his fear. Daniel nodded once, his eyes taking in the scene. The sacred vessels from Jerusalem's temple now profaned with wine, the frightened nobles, the words still glowing on the wall. "I've heard that you can give interpretations and solve difficult problems," the king continued. "If you can read this writing and tell me what it means, you will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around your neck, and you will be made the third highest ruler in the kingdom." Daniel's response cut through the air like a knife. You may keep your gifts for yourself and give your rewards to someone else. Nevertheless, I will read the writing for the king and tell him what it means. Mene, mene, tekel, a parsing. The banquet hall grew still as Daniel addressed the king. No coughs, no whispers, only the soft crackle of torches and the pounding of Belshazzar's heart broke the silence. The old prophet didn't immediately explain the writing. Instead, he began with history, a lesson the young king desperately needed. Your grandfather Nebuchadnezzar was given sovereignty and greatness by the Most High God, Daniel said, his voice stronger than his years might suggest. All peoples and nations trembled before him. Those he wanted to kill, he killed. Those he wanted to spare, he spared. Daniel recounted how pride had led to Nebuchadnezzar's downfall, how the mighty king had been driven from human society to live like a wild animal until he acknowledged a power greater than his own. But you, Belshazzar, his grandson, have not humbled yourself, Daniel continued, pointing a weathered finger at the king. You knew all this, yet you set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You had the vessels from his temple brought to this feast so that you, your nobles, and your wives could drink from them. You praise gods of silver, gold, bronze, iron, wood, and stone, gods that cannot see or hear or understand. But you do not honor the God who holds your life and all your ways in his hand. The king shrank back in his throne, wine-induced confidence now completely evaporated. Daniel turned toward the mysterious writing, his eyes tracing the glowing letters. This is what these words mean, he said. Mene, God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Peres, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. The interpretation fell like a death sentence. Belshazzar sat stunned, the color draining from his face. Around him, courtiers exchanged nervous glances. Would the king rage at the messenger? Would he deny the meaning? Would he repent as his grandfather had done? After a long moment, Belshazzar managed to compose himself. Whether from fear, respect, or simply resignation, he honored his promise. He ordered a purple robe brought for Daniel, a gold chain for his neck, and proclaimed him the third highest ruler in Babylon. The irony wasn't lost on those present. Daniel was being rewarded with high position in a kingdom that, according to his own words, would fall before the next sunrise. It was like being named captain of a sinking ship. Outside the palace walls, unknown to the feasting nobles, military operations were already underway. Persian engineers had been working through the night, diverting the flow of the Euphrates River that ran through the city. As the water level dropped, a path opened beneath Babylon's impenetrable walls, a fatal vulnerability no one had anticipated. As promised gifts were placed on Daniel's shoulders, the first Persian soldiers were already splashing through the lowered riverbed, entering the city that had never fallen. As the prophet spoke truth to power, enemy troops were silently moving through darkened streets toward the palace. The handwriting on the wall wasn't just a message, it was the sound of time running out. The fall of Babylon. That very night, while the words on the wall still lingered in the air, Babylon fell without a prolonged siege or bloody battle. The city that had stood as the world's greatest for generations was taken in hours, almost without resistance. King Cyrus of Persia had studied Babylon's defenses thoroughly. He knew the city's massive walls couldn't be breached by conventional means, but he also knew about the Euphrates River that flowed under the walls and through the heart of the city. This waterway, Babylon's lifeblood, became its downfall. Persian engineers diverted the river upstream, channeling water into a nearby lake. Gradually, the water level beneath Babylon's walls dropped. As Belshazzar and his nobles drank from sacred vessels, Persian soldiers waded through knee-deep water under the very walls designed to keep them out. Guards who should have been watching these vulnerable points were instead attending the king's feast or sleeping off too much wine. The city's defense had grown complacent after decades without serious threats. Who would dare attack mighty Babylon? The Persian troops moved through the darkened streets, swiftly and quietly. They secured key positions throughout the city before most residents even realized what was happening. Some Babylonians, tired of Belshazzar's ineffective rule, actually welcomed the invaders. Others awoke to find their city already under new management. Inside the palace, the king's final moments remained shrouded in mystery. Did he die fighting? Was he caught trying to escape? Did he face his end with dignity or terror? Scripture simply tells us that very night Belshazzar, king of the Babylonians, was slain. By morning, Darius the Mede had taken control of the city. Some historians believe Darius was actually a general or governor serving under Cyrus rather than an independent king. But regardless of his exact position, he became the new ruler of Babylon, inheriting its palaces, treasures, and administrative systems, including its foreign advisors. Daniel, having survived yet another regime change, found himself in the peculiar position of being valued by the very conquerors whose arrival he had predicted. While other Babylonian officials were removed or executed, the aged Hebrew prophet was retained. His reputation for wisdom, integrity, and accurate interpretation had reached even Persian ears. The fall of Babylon marked the exact fulfillment of prophecies given years earlier. Isaiah had named Cyrus as God's instrument for judgment more than a century before the Persian king was born. Jeremiah had foretold the empire's downfall in specific detail. Now Daniel had witnessed these ancient words come to life before his eyes. For the Jewish exiles living in Babylon, the city's conquest brought mixed emotions. Life under Persian rule might prove no better than life under Babylonian authority. Would they remain captives in a foreign land, for only serving different masters? Yet some saw hope in the change, especially when rumors spread that Cyrus held more tolerant views toward local religions and customs. As dawn broke over the conquered city, Daniel watched from a palace window as Persian flags replaced Babylonian standards. The transfer of power was remarkably bloodless compared to most ancient conquests. Markets reopened within days. Common people continued their daily routines. The machinery of government kept turning, albeit with new operators. For Daniel, now in his 80s, the fall of Babylon wasn't just a historical event. It was divine confirmation. The God who had revealed dreams to Nebuchadnezzar, who had protected 3 young men in a fiery furnace, who had humbled a king to madness and restored him to sanity, had now brought the mightiest empire to its knees exactly as foretold. The lion of Daniel's visions had been superseded by the bear. The head of gold had given way to the chest of silver. History was unfolding according to a divine timetable, and Daniel stood as both witness and interpreter of these cosmic movements. The new order, Persia. Darius wasted no time reorganizing his newly acquired territory. The Persian approach to empire differed significantly from the Babylonian model, where Nebuchadnezzar had ruled with an iron hand, demanding absolute loyalty and cultural assimilation. The Persians preferred a lighter touch. Local customs could continue so long as taxes flowed and rebellion was avoided. The new administration divided the kingdom into 120 satrapies, each under a governor responsible for collecting taxes and maintaining order. Above these satraps, Darius appointed 3 administrators to oversee the entire system. To the surprise of many Babylonian officials who had survived the regime change, Daniel was named one of these 3 top officials. Why choose a Hebrew? Whispered critics in the royal court. Why trust an old man from a conquered nation? But Darius saw what others missed. In Daniel, he recognized exceptional qualities that transcended ethnicity and age, wisdom refined by decades of experience, integrity tested by years of temptation, and an administrative mind that understood the complexities of governing diverse peoples. Daniel threw himself into his new duties with remarkable energy for a man of his years. Records were organized, corrupt practices eliminated, and fair standards established. His section of the empire soon outperformed the others in efficiency and revenue collection while generating fewer complaints from local populations. An extraordinary spirit is in this man, Darius reportedly told his advisors. The king began considering an even more dramatic promotion, making Daniel prime minister over the entire empire. Such a move would place a former captive from Judah as second in command of the world's greatest power. This potential promotion sent ripples of alarm through the Persian court. Career politicians and hereditary nobles who had followed Darius from Persia couldn't stomach the thought of serving under a foreigner, much less an elderly Jew. Their pride was wounded, their ambitions threatened. If merit rather than birth or nationality determined rank, many would find themselves displaced. These officials began watching Daniel closely, looking for ammunition to use against him. They scrutinized his records, investigated his personal life, questioned his subordinates. Surely a man with decades in politics must have skeletons in his closet. Bribes accepted, favors traded, rules bent. To their frustration, Daniel's record remained spotless. We will never find any basis for charges against this man unless it has something to do with the law of his God, they concluded. This observation sparked a plan both clever and cruel. These jealous officials understood something fundamental about Daniel. His first loyalty had never been to any earthly king, whether Babylonian or Persian. His allegiance to the God of Israel remained unshaken through captivity, promotion, threat, and change. This faithfulness, his greatest strength, could perhaps become his fatal weakness. The plot took shape quickly. They approached King Darius with flattery thick as honey. "O king, live forever." All the administrators of the kingdom, the prefects and satraps, the advisors and governors, want to issue a royal decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, shall be thrown into the lion's den. This appealed to Darius on multiple levels. It seemed to strengthen his position during this transition period. It created temporary religious unity in a diverse empire, and it satisfied his ego to be treated, however briefly, as divine. The king signed the decree without consulting Daniel. Once signed according to Persian law, the decree could not be revoked, not even by the king himself. The trap was set, the bait laid. Now the plotters needed only to wait for Daniel's legendary devotion to spring the snare. The trap is set. Word of the new law spread quickly through the capital. For 30 days, no prayers could be offered to any god or goddess. No incense could be burned at household shrines. No sacrifices could be made at temples. All religious devotion must be directed solely toward King Darius, or the penalty would be death in the lion's den. Most people simply adjusted their routines. Public displays of worship ceased. Religious rituals moved underground or were temporarily suspended. After all, it was only for 30 days. The gods, if they existed, would surely understand this political necessity. When Daniel heard about the decree, he immediately understood its true purpose. This wasn't about elevating Darius or unifying religious practices. It was about creating a legal trap designed specifically for him. The choice now facing him was stark: compromise his lifelong practice of prayer or face execution. For many, this would have prompted a practical compromise. Couldn't he simply pray silently where no one could see? Couldn't he postpone his devotions for a month? Wouldn't God understand the extraordinary circumstances? Such rationalizations never seriously tempted Daniel. Throughout his long life, prayer had been his anchor in a foreign land. 3 times daily, he had opened his windows toward Jerusalem, knelt in his upper room, and spoken to the God of his fathers. This discipline had sustained him through captivity, political intrigue, and the rise and fall of empires. It wasn't merely religious routine. It was the core of his identity. The aged prophet returned to his house, climbed the stairs to his upper room, and did exactly what he had always done. He opened the windows that faced toward Jerusalem, knelt down, and prayed. He gave thanks to God as was his custom. No concessions, no compromises, no attempts at secrecy beyond his normal practice. Outside his home, hidden in shadows, the conspirators watched and smiled. The trap had worked perfectly. Daniel's predictable faithfulness would now bring about his downfall. They had only to report his crime to the king, and the troublesome Hebrew would be eliminated. They hurried to the palace, barely containing their satisfaction. "Didn't you publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you would be thrown into the lion's den?" they asked Darius. The king nodded. "The decree stands, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed." Then came the accusation. "Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day." Darius's face fell as understanding dawned. He had been manipulated into signing his own trusted administrator's death warrant. The decree that had seemed like a simple way to solidify his authority now revealed itself as a carefully constructed trap. The king had become an unwitting accomplice in a plot against the very man he most trusted. The king spent the rest of the day seeking a legal loophole, some way to save Daniel from the consequences of the immutable law. But Persian legal tradition had specifically been designed to prevent such reversals. Not even the king could change a law once it had been enacted. The system that normally ensured stability now enforced injustice. As the sun began to set, time ran out. The law required immediate enforcement. With a heavy heart, Darius gave the order for Daniel's arrest. Guards were dispatched to bring the elderly official to face the consequence of his unwavering faith. The window stays open. When the royal guards arrived at Daniel's home, they found him exactly where the accusers said he would be, in his upper room, kneeling before the open window, his lips moving in prayer. The old man didn't resist when they placed him under arrest. There was a quiet dignity in the way he rose to his feet, dusted off his knees, and accompanied them without protest. Some witnesses later reported seeing a slight smile on Daniel's face, not the nervous grin of someone trying to mask fear, but the peaceful expression of a man at peace with his choices. He had known the consequences when he opened his window that morning. He had counted the cost when he knelt on the familiar prayer cushion. He had accepted the possible outcome when he spoke his prayers aloud as he had done for decades. As they led him through the streets toward the palace, people stopped to watch. Here was the highest Jewish official in the Persian government being led away in custody. Some onlookers whispered behind their hands. Others looked away, embarrassed or afraid. A few followed at a distance, curious about what would happen next. Inside the palace, King Darius received Daniel with evident distress. "Your God, whom you serve continually, he will rescue you," the king said, though his voice lacked conviction. Was this encouragement, hope, or merely wishful thinking from a ruler trapped by his own decree? Daniel stood calmly before the king, no begging for mercy, no dramatic speeches, no last-minute appeals. His life had been a testament to consistency. Why should his final hours be any different? The procession moved to the lion's den, a pit dug into the ground, accessed through a stone entrance that could be sealed with a boulder. The royal menagerie included multiple lions kept for ceremonial purposes and occasional executions. They were deliberately underfed to ensure their fierceness when needed for punishments like this one. As Daniel approached the den, the sounds became unmistakable, the low growls of hungry predators sensing movement above. The heavy stone was rolled aside. Guards stood ready with spears to force the prisoner forward if necessary. "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you," Darius repeated, perhaps trying to convince himself as much as Daniel. The aged prophet faced the dark opening without flinching. Some accounts suggest he walked into the den voluntarily rather than being thrown in, one last act of dignity and choice. The stone was rolled back into place and sealed with the king's signet ring to prevent tampering. Additional seals from the nobles were added to ensure no one could rescue the prisoner during the night. Above the sealed den, an unusual scene unfolded. King Darius, rather than returning to his palace, remained nearby. He refused food. He declined entertainment. Musicians brought to distract him were sent away. Sleep eluded him as he passed the night in self-imposed discomfort, a king voluntarily sharing, in some small measure, the hardship of his falsely accused servant. Inside the den, the night passed differently than anyone expected. The biblical account gives us no details of Daniel's experiences hour by hour. Did he pray through the night? Did he sleep peacefully surrounded by predators? Did he recall the faithful actions of his 3 friends decades earlier in Nebuchadnezzar's furnace? We are told only the outcome, not the process. In homes throughout the capital, the conspiracy's architects celebrated what they assumed was their victory. Positions would soon be redistributed. The foreigners' influence had been eliminated. The natural order, with them at the top, would soon be restored. None suspected that morning would bring a very different reality. Into the den. The first light of dawn found King Darius already hurrying toward the lion's den. He had passed a sleepless night, troubled by his role in condemning an innocent man. The manipulation by his officials had become painfully clear, but acknowledgement came too late to save Daniel from the law's requirements. Guards and court officials followed at a distance, exchanging puzzled glances. Why would the king rush to visit what would surely be a grisly scene? What could he hope to find but the mangled remains of his former administrator? Approaching the sealed entrance, Darius called out in an anguished voice, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" The silence that followed seemed to confirm what everyone assumed. The king's shoulders slumped. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, a sound emerged from the pit. A voice, calm, clear, and very much alive. "May the king live forever." Daniel's familiar voice replied, "My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." Joy transformed the king's face. He immediately ordered the stone removed. Guards rushed forward, straining against the heavy boulder until light penetrated the den's darkness. There stood Daniel, completely unharmed. No wounds marked his body. His clothes were intact. He stood straight and dignified among the lions, who remained unusually calm in his presence. Ropes were lowered, and Daniel was quickly hoisted out of the pit. Medical attendants rushed forward to examine him, but found nothing to treat. Not a scratch, not a bruise. The elderly prophet had spent the night with hungry lions and emerged without a single injury. King Darius embraced Daniel publicly, making no attempt to hide his relief and admiration. Then his expression hardened as he turned toward the officials who had engineered this plot. Royal justice in ancient Persia was swift and often symmetrical. Those who had dug a pit for Daniel would now face the same fate. "Bring those men who falsely accused Daniel," the king commanded. The conspirators were rounded up, along with their wives and children, a harsh practice in ancient justice systems where family members often shared punishment. Their protests fell on deaf ears as they were led to the same pit from which Daniel had just emerged. They never reached the floor of the den. Witnesses reported that the lions overpowered them before they even hit the ground, crushing their bones in powerful jaws. The same beasts that had remained mysteriously passive with Daniel now demonstrated their natural ferocity. The contrast could not have been more stark or the message more clear. King Darius, deeply impressed by these events, issued a new decree that reached to all corners of his vast empire. "In every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed, his dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves, he performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions." For Daniel, the lion's den became not an end, but another beginning. Under Darius and later under Cyrus, his influence grew. The elderly prophet who had remained faithful through multiple regimes continued to serve, his testimony more powerful than ever. He had literally stared death in the face and found it powerless against divine protection. Throughout the capital, the story spread quickly, gaining embellishments with each retelling. Some claimed the lions had bowed before Daniel. Others insisted they had licked his feet like house cats. Still others reported seeing a shining figure standing beside the prophet throughout the night, an angel visible even to the beasts. Whatever the exact details, one truth remained clear. The man who had refused to close his window had found an open door, the night with lions. The stone sealed the mouth of the den, and darkness fell. Above ground, the palace buzzed with whispers, but below, a strange quiet settled among the beasts. Daniel sat still, his old bones aching against the cold earth. The lions, known for their hunger and rage, kept their distance. Their eyes glowed in the dark, watching but not approaching. Hours passed like this. Daniel in prayer, the lions at bay. Perhaps he recalled the stories of his youth, the tales of Abraham and Moses, who also faced impossible odds. Or maybe he simply waited, trusting in the same God who had guided him through decades of exile. Deep in the night, a soft light appeared. Not from torch or fire, but a gentle glow that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere. The Bible speaks of an angel sent to shut the lions' mouths. What might this have looked like? A mighty warrior with wings and armor? Or perhaps just a presence, invisible to human eyes, but unmistakable to the beasts? The lions, creatures of instinct and hunger, lay down as if tamed. Their muscles relaxed, their jaws closed. Was it fear that held them back, or something deeper? The text doesn't say, but what we know is this: the natural order bent that night. The hungry did not hunt, the strong did not attack the weak. Daniel, now in his 80s, spent the night in this strange peace. His life had been a series of tests, each one requiring faith when logic said to surrender. Now, in what might be his final hours, he faced the greatest test of all. Trapped with killers yet wrapped in calm, somewhere above, King Darius paced his halls, unable to sleep. The law he signed had trapped not only Daniel, but himself, caught between royal decree and deep regret. The king had grown fond of the Jewish advisor who served with unusual wisdom and integrity. Unlike the other officials who schemed and climbed for power, Daniel simply worked, prayed, and spoke truth. Back in the den, Daniel may have dozed, his aged body giving in to exhaustion despite the danger. Or perhaps he stayed awake all night, communing with the God who had been his shelter through 3 empires and countless trials. The Bible doesn't tell us the details of those hours, only the outcome. What thoughts filled Daniel's mind as midnight turned to early morning? Did he wonder if rescue would come? Did he make peace with death? Or did he simply rest in the knowledge that whether he lived or died, he belonged to God? The text leaves this to our imagination. The lions remained still as sentinels. Mighty hunters turned to peaceful companions for one strange night, their natural hunger somehow satisfied or suspended by divine command. And in this unlikely sanctuary, Daniel waited for dawn, alive in the place of death. Dawn and deliverance. First light crept across Babylon as Darius rushed to the lion's den. He had spent the night without food or musicians, unusual for a king accustomed to comfort. Sleep had eluded him as guilt pressed heavy on his heart. He had condemned a good man to death because of clever manipulation by jealous officials. The king approached the sealed pit with dread. "Daniel, servant of the living God," he called out, his voice breaking with emotion. "Has your God, whom you serve so faithfully, been able to rescue you from the lions?" The silence that followed must have felt eternal. Guards exchanged glances, officials held their breath. Then, rising from the depths, a calm reply, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight." Relief washed over Darius like a flood. The impossible had happened. Daniel had survived the night with hungry beasts. Joy replaced despair as the king ordered the stone removed and Daniel lifted from the pit. Those watching must have been amazed to find not a single scratch on the elderly advisor. No wounds, no blood, just an old man standing tall, dusty but unharmed. The king's relief quickly turned to rage when he thought of the officials who had tricked him. Justice in ancient kingdoms was swift and often brutal. Those who had plotted against Daniel now faced the fate they had designed for him. Darius had them thrown into the same den, but without divine protection, they met a different end. The lions, no longer restrained, pounced before the victims even reached the floor. Daniel watched this turn of events with complex emotions. He had not sought revenge, but ancient justice systems operated on principles of symmetry. Those who dug pits for others often fell into them themselves. The Bible records this outcome without commentary, simply noting that the conspirators and their families met the fate they had planned for Daniel. As the dust settled, Daniel emerged not just alive, but vindicated. His survival spoke volumes in a culture where signs and omens shaped policy. If lions, symbols of royal power, couldn't harm this man, what did that say about his God? The answer would soon spread throughout the empire. The elderly prophet walked back to his duties, perhaps still brushing dust from his robes. He had entered the den prepared to die for his faith. He emerged as living proof that loyalty to God transcended loyalty to human powers. And in the courts of Babylon, people took notice. A decree across nations. King Darius wasted no time responding to the miracle. Seated on his throne, still processing what he had witnessed, he dictated a new decree, one that would travel to every corner of his vast realm. "Peace and prosperity to you all," the proclamation began. Couriers prepared to carry these words to distant provinces speaking dozens of languages. What followed wasn't just policy, but personal testimony from a shaken ruler. "I decree that everyone throughout my kingdom should tremble with fear before the God of Daniel," the message continued. Royal scribes recorded these words on clay and parchment as officials looked on in surprise. This wasn't the usual announcement about taxes or military campaigns. This was something new. Darius described this God in terms his subjects could understand. He is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his rule will never end. For people accustomed to thinking of gods as regional powers limited to certain territories, this universal claim raised eyebrows. The decree continued with words that must have startled those who heard them. He rescues and saves. He performs signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. Coming from the mouth of a Persian king, these were extraordinary claims, especially considering the empire's own religious traditions. Couriers departed the palace carrying this message to far-flung provinces, from Egypt to India, from the Black Sea to the Persian Gulf. In marketplaces and village squares, royal messengers read these words aloud: "He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions." What motivated this dramatic royal endorsement? Was it genuine spiritual awakening, political strategy, or simply awe in the face of the unexplainable? The text doesn't fully reveal Darius's heart, but something about Daniel's survival had deeply affected the king. For Daniel himself, now returning to royal service, this turn of events revealed a pattern in his long life: personal faithfulness leading to public testimony. His private prayers by an open window had become an empire-wide proclamation. His individual stand had rippled outward, touching lives far beyond his own circle. People throughout the kingdom received this news with mixed reactions. Some scoffed at the idea of a Jewish god being praised by a Persian king. Others wondered if this was just another political move. But some, perhaps, pondered the story of an old man who survived a night with lions because he refused to stop praying. And Daniel carried on, serving yet another king, living as an exile who somehow shaped the very empire that had taken him captive. The lion's den was behind him now, but the greatest visions of his life were still to come. The vision years begin with the lion's den behind him. Daniel entered the winter of his life. Now, in his 80s, his hair had turned white, his steps slower than in youth. Yet his mind remained sharp, his spirit attuned to deeper currents than most could sense. During these later years, strange dreams began to visit him. Not like the practical problems of his earlier life, interpreting a king's nightmare or reading mysterious writing on a wall. These new visions swept across time itself, revealing patterns that would unfold long after his bones turned to dust. The first such dream came during Belshazzar's first year as ruler, before the infamous feast where fingers wrote on palace walls. Daniel slept, and in his sleep the veil between worlds seemed to lift. He witnessed scenes so vivid and troubling that he carefully recorded them upon waking. "I saw in my vision by night," he wrote, his hand perhaps trembling slightly. Unlike earlier in his career when he interpreted others' dreams, these visions came directly to him. No one asked him to explain them. No king demanded answers. These revelations were more personal, more puzzling. The aging prophet found himself standing at a crossroads of purpose. His public career serving kings remained active, but now a private ministry emerged, receiving and recording visions meant for future generations. He became both statesman and seer, with one foot in current politics and another in distant futures. What caused this shift? The text doesn't say. Perhaps advancing age brought a certain detachment from daily concerns. Perhaps faithful service had prepared him for deeper insights. Or maybe, having proven his loyalty through fiery furnaces and lions' dens, he was now trusted with heavier secrets. Daniel approached these visions with both wonder and distress. Unlike modern readers who might view prophetic literature with academic detachment, he experienced these revelations with his whole being. When he saw coming suffering, he physically reacted, sometimes falling ill for days afterward. These weren't abstract theological concepts to him, but glimpses of real events that would affect real people. The emotional toll of seeing centuries of human struggle left him occasionally bedridden, overwhelmed by the weight of knowledge he couldn't fully process. And yet he wrote it all down: the beasts, the conflicts, the mysterious numbers and times. He preserved these revelations even when they confused him. "I heard, but I did not understand," he admitted at one point. The humility of this statement reveals much about Daniel's character. Even after decades of divine encounters, he maintained the posture of a student rather than a master. As Babylon fell and Persia rose, Daniel continued this dual life: valued advisor in royal courts by day, receiver of apocalyptic visions by night. Few around him likely understood the full scope of what was happening in his inner world. To most, he was simply an unusually wise official who had survived multiple regime changes. But in quiet moments, when the court business ended and night fell over Babylon, this elderly exile wrestled with images of kingdoms rising and falling like waves on a cosmic sea. The stage was set for revelations that would echo through millennia, the four beasts. The first of Daniel's great personal visions arrived like a storm. As he slept, the four winds of heaven seemed to churn the surface of a vast sea. From these troubled waters, four strange creatures emerged, each more unsettling than the last. First came a lion with eagle's wings. As Daniel watched, its wings were torn off. Then it stood upright like a human and received a human mind. Strange as this sounds to modern ears, ancient audiences would have recognized elements from Babylonian royal imagery, where winged lions guarded palace gates. Next rose a lopsided bear, raised up on one side with three ribs clutched between its teeth. A voice commanded it to devour much flesh, and the creature seemed hungry for conquest. The uneven stance suggested an empire stronger on one side than the other, perhaps the Medo-Persian alliance, where Persia gradually dominated. The third beast appeared as a leopard with four wings and four heads. Its unusual features suggested speed and divided authority. Many scholars later connected this image with Alexander the Great's empire, which conquered with remarkable swiftness and split into four parts after his death. But the fourth creature defied familiar comparisons. Terrifying and dreadful and extremely strong, Daniel wrote, still shaken by the memory. With iron teeth and 10 horns, it crushed everything in its path. Unlike the previous beasts that resembled known animals, this one seemed to be a monster without natural parallel. As Daniel focused on this final beast, he noticed something strange. A small horn growing among the others. This horn had human eyes and a mouth, speaking arrogantly. As this little horn grew, 3 others were uprooted to make room for it. The symbolism wasn't explained in the dream itself, leaving Daniel troubled upon waking. But the pattern became clear. 4 empires would rise in sequence, each represented by a creature that matched its character. Scholars across centuries have debated the exact identities, but many settle on Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome as the historical sequence. For Daniel, these weren't academic exercises, but troubling glimpses of struggles that would unfold after his lifetime. The progression showed human kingdoms becoming less human and more mechanized, less glorious and more efficient at destruction. What struck Daniel most wasn't just the parade of powers, but their ultimate fate. For after these kingdoms had their time, something unexpected would happen, something that would change everything. But before that final outcome, the mysterious little horn would play its role on the world stage. The vision left Daniel shaken, wrestling with implications he couldn't fully grasp. These weren't just political predictions, but glimpses into the pattern of history itself, the rise and fall of human power in contrast to something more enduring. And as the images faded with morning light, Daniel surely wondered what these strange beasts would mean for his people scattered in exile. The little horn. Among all the strange features of Daniel's beast vision, one detail demanded special attention: the small horn with human eyes and an arrogant mouth. While the great beasts represented empires spanning continents, this little horn suggested an individual, someone whose words would cause more damage than armies. Daniel watched as this horn made war against the holy ones and was defeating them. Despite its small beginnings, it grew until it spoke words against the Most High and tried to change times and law. For those who treasured God's commands, no threat could be more serious than an attempt to rewrite divine instructions. The little horn would control things for a time, times, and half a time, a cryptic period that has generated centuries of debate. Was this 3.5 years? Some other measure? The text leaves this deliberately vague, speaking in the coded language of apocalyptic literature. What kind of leader was this horn meant to represent? The clues point to someone intelligent, the eyes, persuasive, the mouth, and hostile to traditional worship. Someone who would use words as weapons and attempt to reshape society's basic rhythms and rules. Throughout history, various figures have seemed to fit this description. Many early Christians saw it fulfilled in Antiochus' 4th Epiphanes, the Seleucid ruler who desecrated Jerusalem's temple by sacrificing pigs on the altar and placing an image of Zeus in the holy place. This crisis, occurring around 167 BCE, matched many details of Daniel's vision. Others have seen the pattern repeated in Roman emperors who demanded divine worship, or in later persecutors who tried to stamp out religious practices. The beauty and challenge of apocalyptic imagery is its ability to describe patterns that may recur throughout history rather than single events. For Daniel, the vision carried immediate concern about future threats to Jewish identity. Having spent his life balancing loyalty to foreign kings with faithfulness to God's commands, he recognized the danger of a ruler who directly attacked the foundations of faith. But the vision didn't end with the little horn's temporary victory. What came next would transform Daniel's understanding of history itself, shifting his gaze from earthly courts to a higher judgment. As the horn spoke its proud words, the scene suddenly changed. Thrones appeared where none had been before. And upon one of these thrones sat a figure unlike any earthly ruler, one who would pass judgment on the powers that had dominated human history. The little horn's voice became a footnote in a larger story. Its boasts faded as a greater authority entered the scene. And for Daniel, watching these images unfold in his night vision, the contrast must have brought both terror and hope. Terror at the coming conflict, hope in its ultimate resolution. The Ancient of Days. The vision shifted dramatically, from beasts rising from churning waters to something entirely different, a courtroom beyond time and space. Thrones appeared, seemingly suspended in midair, and then a presence unlike anything in human experience took his seat. The Ancient of Days took his place, Daniel wrote, using a title found nowhere else in Hebrew scripture. This wasn't just another king or even a typical divine appearance. This was God revealed as the ultimate judge of history, the one who existed before time began. Daniel described what he saw in symbols his mind could grasp: clothing white as snow, crushed hair like pure wool. These weren't fashion statements, but representations of absolute purity and wisdom that comes with immeasurable age. This was not youth and strength as humans prize them, but something deeper: ageless authority. Most striking was the throne itself, wheels of blazing fire and a stream of fire flowing out from its presence. In a world lit by candles and oil lamps, fire represented both danger and purification. This was judgment that could not be corrupted or avoided. Thousands upon thousands attended him, Daniel noted, describing a scene of cosmic order where heavenly beings stood ready to execute divine decisions. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The numbers weren't meant to be precise, but to convey multitudes beyond counting, a full heavenly court. Then the proceedings began. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. What books were these? Records of human deeds? The unfolding of divine purposes? Daniel doesn't explain, but the image suggests complete knowledge. Nothing hidden, nothing forgotten. For an exile who had witnessed the seemingly unstoppable power of empires, this vision revealed a startling truth. Human kingdoms rise and fall under watchful eyes. The mighty beasts that devoured nations were themselves subject to judgment. The powers that seemed eternal were merely temporary. The fourth beast, the most terrible of all, received special attention. While Daniel watched, the beast was slain and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. The engine of conquest that had crushed everything in its path was itself crushed by higher authority. As for the other beasts, they lost their dominion but were allowed to live for a period of time. The pattern revealed something profound about human history. Empires fade, their power diminished, yet aspects of their influence linger in cultures and systems that follow them. For Daniel, living under Persian rule after witnessing Babylon's fall, this perspective would have provided both comfort and context. The empires that shaped his life were themselves shaped by divine permission and subject to divine limits. But the Ancient of Days didn't just end old powers. He was about to establish something entirely new. As Daniel continued watching, someone else approached the fiery throne, a figure who would receive authority that would never pass away, the Son of Man. The vision continued with a new figure entering the heavenly courtroom. With the clouds of heaven, Daniel wrote, there came one like a son of man. This simple phrase, son of man, would echo through centuries of religious thought, eventually becoming one of the most significant titles in spiritual history. But who was this figure that approached the Ancient of Days? The description is brief yet profound. Unlike the beasts rising from chaotic seas, representing kingdoms born of earthly struggle, this one came with heaven's clouds. Not from below, but from above. And unlike the creatures with their animal features, this was like a son of man, having human form. After watching kingdoms portrayed as increasingly inhuman and mechanical, Daniel now saw true authority residing in one who bore humanity's image. The scene reached its climax as this human figure was presented before the Ancient of Days. No fear, no trembling, just perfect communion between the judge of all and the one approaching the throne. Then something remarkable happened. To him was given dominion and glory and kingdom. This wasn't just another empire taking its turn on history's stage. This was something entirely different. An everlasting dominion which shall not pass away. While earlier kingdoms rose only to fall, this authority would never be destroyed. The people living under this rule would come from all peoples, nations, and languages. Unlike empires built through conquest and subjugation, this kingdom would somehow unite human diversity without erasing it. For Jewish readers through the centuries, this vision spoke of the coming Messiah who would restore Israel's hopes. For Christians, the Son of Man became one of Jesus' favorite self-descriptions, a deliberate connection to Daniel's prophecy. What Daniel himself understood of the vision isn't fully clear. Like many prophets, he likely searched intently and with the greatest care, as Peter would later write, to understand what these visions meant and when they would be fulfilled. The connection between this heavenly figure and the suffering servant described by Isaiah wasn't obvious at first. How could supreme authority and sacrificial suffering exist in the same person? The full picture would only become clear with time and further revelation. But for Daniel in that moment, the vision provided a crucial truth. The beasts would not have the final word. Human empires with their iron teeth and trampling feet would eventually bow before one who united humanity's form with divine authority. History had a direction beyond endless cycles of rising and falling powers. As the vision faded, leaving Daniel troubled in spirit, the pattern was set. From chaos to cosmos, from beasts to the truly human, from temporary dominion to eternal kingdom. This framework would shape how future generations interpreted the flow of history itself. Gabriel arrives. The visions became increasingly complex, and Daniel found himself overwhelmed. After seeing the four beasts and the Ancient of Days, he received another troubling set of images. A ram and a goat locked in cosmic battle. But unlike previous revelations where understanding came later, this time help arrived in an unexpected form. As Daniel tried to make sense of what he'd seen, a figure looking like a man suddenly stood before him. This was no ordinary visitor. Gabriel, a voice commanded from across the Ulai Canal, tell this man the meaning of the vision. The name Gabriel, meaning God is my strength, appears here for the first time in Scripture. This wasn't just any messenger, but one of heaven's princes, sent specifically to help Daniel understand what he had witnessed. The arrival of Gabriel marked a new phase in prophetic revelation. No longer did Daniel simply receive mysterious images without context. Now heaven itself sent an interpreter, bridging the gap between divine knowledge and human understanding. Gabriel's appearance terrified Daniel, who fell face down on the ground. Son of Man, the angel addressed him, ironically using the same title Daniel had just seen in his vision of the heavenly court. Understand that the vision concerns the time of the end. While Daniel lay there in a deep sleep with his face to the ground, Gabriel touched him and helped him to his feet. The contrast is striking. A human prophet overwhelmed by revelation, a heavenly messenger sent to strengthen and instruct him. The explanation that followed turned symbolic images into historical predictions. The ram with two horns represented the kings of Media and Persia. The goat was the king of Greece, whose large horn was the first king, widely understood as Alexander the Great. Gabriel's interpretations provided something rare in apocalyptic literature, a clear key to understanding the symbols. This has allowed readers through the centuries to connect Daniel's visions with historical events, watching prophecy align with unfolding history. But Gabriel didn't just explain past fulfillments. His message pointed to the time of the end, events still distant from Daniel's day. The vision refers to the appointed time of the end, he emphasized, suggesting these patterns would repeat or find ultimate fulfillment in a final crisis. The encounter left Daniel exhausted and ill for days. Physical weakness following spiritual experience appears frequently in apocalyptic encounters, showing the toll that glimpsing beyond the veil takes on human frames. When he finally recovered enough to return to royal service, Daniel was appalled by the vision. It was beyond understanding. Even with Gabriel's help, the full implications remained partially sealed, waiting for time itself to provide clarity. This pattern, revelation, confusion, partial explanation, continued mystery, characterizes much of prophetic literature. Complete understanding often comes only in retrospect, when history catches up with prophecy. But Gabriel's arrival established an important truth. Heaven wants humans to understand, even when the message stretches beyond our immediate grasp. The 70 weeks years passed since Daniel's earlier visions. Now, during the first year of Darius, he made a remarkable discovery while reading the prophet Jeremiah's writings. There, he found a specific time frame for Judah's exile, 70 years. Counting from when he himself had been taken to Babylon, the period was nearing its end. This revelation stirred Daniel to intense prayer. Dressed in rough clothes, sitting in ashes, he fasted and poured out his heart. He didn't just petition God, but confessed national sins, identifying himself with his people's failures, even though he personally had remained faithful. "We have sinned and done wrong," he prayed. "We have turned away from your commands." This prayer, one of the Bible's most moving confessions, showed Daniel's deep connection to his people, despite decades in foreign courts. While still speaking, something extraordinary happened. Gabriel, the same angel who had interpreted earlier visions, appeared again, coming in swift flight around the time of evening sacrifice. Though no temple stood and no sacrifices were being offered in exile, heaven still operated according to sacred rhythms. "Daniel," the angel said, "I have come to give you insight and understanding." What followed was one of Scripture's most studied and debated prophecies, the prophecy of 70 weeks. 77s are decreed for your people and your holy city, Gabriel began. The Hebrew word for sevens could mean weeks or simply groups of 7, likely referring to years rather than literal weeks, following patterns established in Leviticus, where 7-year cycles structured agricultural and economic life. These 77s, or 490 years, would accomplish multiple purposes: to finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. Gabriel then divided this period into 3 segments: 7 weeks, 49 years, 62 weeks, 434 years, and a final week, 7 years. The first period would begin with the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, and would see the city rebuilt with streets and a trench, but in times of trouble. After the second period, the 62 weeks, an anointed one will be put to death and will have nothing. Most Christian interpreters have seen this as referring to Jesus Christ, whose crucifixion occurred after the approximate time frame when counted from Persian decrees to rebuild Jerusalem. The final week contained the most mysterious elements, including a ruler who will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7, but halfway through will put an end to sacrifice and offering. Various interpretations of this timeline have been proposed through centuries of study. Some see the entire prophecy fulfilled in events surrounding Jerusalem's destruction in 70 CE. Others place the final week in the future, still awaiting fulfillment. Still others see multiple fulfillments, patterns that repeat through history. What remains clear is Gabriel's message of divine timing. Human history doesn't unfold randomly, but follows a purpose. Empires rise and fall, Jerusalem gets destroyed and rebuilt. Even the Messiah's death happens according to a timetable set long before. For Daniel, advanced in years and concerned for his people's future, this revelation provided both comfort and challenge. Restoration would come, but through more troubles, more testings, more faithfulness required. The pattern of exile and return would continue until all things found their completion. The ram and the goat. In his old age, Daniel's visions grew more vivid and strange. One night, he found himself standing beside the Ulai Canal. The water flowed gently as he looked up to see a ram with 2 horns. One horn rose higher than the other, though it grew out later. This powerful creature charged west, north, and south. No beast could stand against it as it did whatever it pleased, growing ever stronger. While Daniel watched in wonder, a male goat appeared from the west. This goat moved without touching the ground, as if flying across the earth's surface. Between its eyes sat a prominent horn. The goat approached the ram in a rage, striking it and shattering both its horns. The ram could not resist as the goat threw it to the ground and trampled it. The goat grew exceedingly great, but at the height of its power, the large horn broke off. In its place sprouted 4 horns toward the 4 winds of heaven. From one of these emerged a little horn that grew toward the south, east, and the beautiful land. It grew until it reached the host of heaven, casting some stars down and trampling them. It even challenged the prince of the host, taking away daily sacrifices and bringing down the sanctuary. Daniel heard holy ones speaking. How long will the vision about regular sacrifices be, the offense that brings ruin, and the surrender of the sanctuary and host to be trampled? Another replied, For 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary will be restored. The meaning remained cloudy until Gabriel approached. Understand, Son of Man, he said gently. This vision concerns the time of the end. The ram with 2 horns represented the kings of Media and Persia. The shaggy goat symbolized Greece, the large horn its first king. When that horn broke, 4 kingdoms would rise from that nation, though none as powerful as the first. History unfolded just as Daniel saw. The Persian Empire expanded greatly under Cyrus and his successors. Then Alexander the Great swept from Macedonia, conquering Persia with stunning speed. After Alexander died young, his empire split among 4 generals. Cassander took Macedonia and Greece, Lysimachus claimed Thrace and Asia Minor, Seleucus controlled Syria and Babylonia, and Ptolemy ruled Egypt. From the Seleucid line came Antiochus Epiphanes, who desecrated the Jerusalem temple, setting up pagan idols and sacrificing unclean animals. The Jewish people would later celebrate the temple's cleansing with the festival of Hanukkah. Daniel's vision stretched beyond his own time, offering comfort to later generations who would witness these events. The message was clear: kingdoms rise and fall, yet heaven watches over all. The abomination. A dark shadow looms in Daniel's prophecies, the abomination that causes desolation. This terrible event would strike at the heart of Jewish worship, desecrating what was most holy. Daniel saw this first through the actions of Antiochus IV Epiphanes, ruler of the Seleucid Empire from 175 to 164 BCE. His name itself told a story. Epiphanes means God manifest, a title he gave himself. Where previous rulers had respected Jewish customs, Antiochus dreamed of uniting his kingdom under Greek culture and religion. When rumors spread that Antiochus had died in Egypt, a revolt broke out in Jerusalem. Upon his return, the king's fury knew no bounds. His soldiers fell upon the city on the Sabbath, killing many who refused to defend themselves on the holy day. The temple treasury was plundered. Sacred vessels disappeared. Worst of all, Antiochus set up an altar to Zeus in the temple and sacrificed pigs, animals considered unclean, upon it. Jewish practices like circumcision became punishable by death. Many fled to the hills. Others chose martyrdom over abandoning their faith. This desecration fulfilled what Daniel had foreseen. His armed forces will rise up to desecrate the temple fortress and will abolish the daily sacrifice. Then they will set up the abomination that causes desolation. Yet Daniel's vision pointed beyond this moment. Jesus himself would later reference Daniel's prophecy, speaking of another abomination to come. When you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. For Jewish listeners hearing Daniel's story, the message carried both warning and hope. Yes, terrible profanation would come. Sacred spaces would be violated. But these events were not beyond God's knowledge or control. They appeared in vision before they happened, proving divine foreknowledge over even the darkest moments of history. The temple would be cleansed. The faithful would prevail. Though kings might claim divine status, their power remained limited and temporary. True worship would continue, outlasting those who sought to destroy it. In this tension between desolation and restoration, Daniel's prophecies offered a lifeline to people facing persecution. The pain was real, but not eternal. The story had not reached its final chapter, the time of wrath. Daniel's visions weighed heavily on his heart. The burden of foreseeing centuries of suffering left him physically ill for days. Unlike prophets who glimpsed only their own time, Daniel carried knowledge of troubles stretching far beyond his lifespan. After one particularly troubling vision, Daniel wrote, "I was worn out. I lay exhausted for days. Then I got up and went about the king's business. I was appalled by the vision. It was beyond understanding." The elderly prophet saw waves of conflict washing over the promised land. Empires would rise and crash against each other like storm-tossed seas. Between these giants, the tiny nation of Israel would suffer repeatedly, caught in currents beyond their control. Most distressing was the time of wrath, a period when suffering would intensify. Daniel learned that before final deliverance, his people would endure unprecedented tribulation. The angel told him, "There will be a time of distress such as has not happened from the beginning of nations until then." This knowledge tortured Daniel. He who had survived exile, served foreign kings, and faced hungry lions now found himself overwhelmed by visions of what lay ahead. The man who interpreted dreams for others couldn't fully grasp his own revelations. Night after night, Daniel sought understanding through prayer and fasting. Heaven's reply came not in easy answers, but in assurance that all history moves toward divine purpose. The suffering wasn't random or eternal. Each event, however painful, formed part of a larger pattern leading to restoration. Daniel's personal distress mirrors our own reactions to troubling futures we cannot control. His response offers wisdom, not denial of difficulty, but honest acknowledgement paired with continued faithfulness. Though carrying foreknowledge of generations of pain, Daniel kept serving, praying, and trusting. For listeners walking through their own times of distress, Daniel's experience speaks deeply. Anxiety about coming troubles is natural, even for the most faithful, yet that very anxiety can drive us back to the source of peace. The time of wrath in Daniel's visions always gave way to deliverance. Darkness yields to dawn. The story pushes through suffering toward hope, reminding us that our knowledge of tomorrow remains incomplete. We see the shadows, but perhaps not the light already gathering on the horizon. The final vision. By the banks of the Tigris River, Daniel received his final recorded vision. Now in his 80s, the prophet had lived through the fall of Babylon and witnessed Persian rule. His lifetime spanned the rise and collapse of history's greatest empire. Yet what he now saw would make those events seem small. A man clothed in linen appeared, his body like topaz, face like lightning, eyes like flaming torches. Those with Daniel saw nothing but felt overwhelming dread, running to hide. Left alone, Daniel's strength drained away as he listened. The messenger pulled back the curtain on a vast cosmic conflict underlying earthly politics. Angelic princes battled over nations while human kings rose and fell. The vision stretched far beyond Daniel's day, outlining conflicts between rulers called the King of the North and King of the South, likely referring to the Seleucid and Ptolemaic dynasties that would fight over the Holy Land after Alexander's empire split. In precise detail, Daniel foresaw how these powers would make alliances through marriage only to betray each other. Armies would flow back and forth across the land like tides. Temples would be plundered. The faithful would suffer, yet help many understand. Most disturbing was the emergence of a ruler described as having no regard for the gods of his ancestors or for the one desired by women, nor will he regard any god, but will exalt himself above them all. This contemptuous king would honor instead a god of fortresses. Military might would be his true religion. Scholars have connected this figure with Antiochus Epiphanes, whose persecution of Jewish practices brought the Maccabean revolt. Yet the portrait also seems to reach beyond any single historical figure toward an archetype repeated through history, the leader who makes himself the center of worship. The vision concluded with promises of deliverance. At that time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will arise. There will be a time of distress such as has not happened from the beginning of nations until then. But at that time, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. For Daniel, these weren't abstract predictions, but glimpses of real suffering his beloved people would endure. Each conquest, each desecration, each martyrdom passed before his eyes. No wonder he fell ill afterward. Yet woven through the darkness ran golden threads of hope. The true king still reigned. History remained under divine guidance. The story would end in deliverance. Michael rises. In Daniel's final vision, a magnificent promise emerges from the shadows of conflict. At that time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will arise. This brief statement offers immense comfort. Heaven itself would intervene when troubles peaked. Michael appears only 3 times in the Hebrew Bible, each time in Daniel's visions. His name poses a challenge. Who is like God? A question that answers itself. No one is. Yet Michael serves as heaven's warrior, the angelic protector specifically assigned to Israel. The vision reveals a startling truth. Nations have spiritual princes engaged in unseen conflict. Earlier, the messenger told Daniel he had been opposed by the prince of the Persian kingdom for 21 days until Michael came to help. These weren't human rulers, but spiritual powers connected to earthly kingdoms. This cosmic perspective transforms how we view history. Behind military campaigns and policy decisions lie deeper struggles. The visible clashes between empires reflect invisible warfare. Nothing happens in isolation. Earth's story intertwines with heaven's. Michael's rising signals divine intervention at the darkest hour. When human help fails, heaven's champion stands up. This imagery would later influence Jewish apocalyptic literature and eventually appear in Revelation, where Michael leads angels in battle against the dragon. For early hearers of Daniel's story, this promise held special meaning. Tiny Judah could never match the military might of surrounding empires. Their survival always seemed precarious. Yet Daniel's vision assured them that their true defender wasn't limited to human resources. The nation had a champion beyond the stars. The promise extends beyond ancient Israel. Whenever evil seems unstoppable, whenever darkness deepens, the vision whispers hope. Michael rises. Heaven isn't passive. Help comes precisely when needed most. Daniel's glimpse into spiritual realities reminds us that appearances deceive. What looks like defeat may mask approaching victory. The humble may have powerful allies. The faithful never stand alone, even when isolated by persecution. This comfort carries responsibility. If heaven itself engages in earth's struggles, how should we live? Not in fear, certainly. Not in despair. Instead, with confidence that our efforts, however small, connect to larger purposes. We fight alongside unseen allies. Michael rises still, sealed until the end. As Daniel's visions concluded, he heard a curious instruction. Close up and seal the words of the scroll until the time of the end. Unlike prophets called to proclaim immediate messages, Daniel received insights meant partly for distant generations. The aging prophet stood bewildered. "My Lord, what will the outcome of all this be?" he asked. The answer came gently but firmly. "Go your way, Daniel, because the words are rolled up and sealed until the time of the end." This sealing didn't mean complete incomprehension. Many prophecies found partial fulfillment in subsequent centuries. The Persian Empire fell to Greece, as foretold. Antiochus desecrated the temple. Rome eventually dominated the region. Yet certain elements remained mysterious, their meaning unfolding only with time's passage. The messenger offered a cryptic time frame. From the time that the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. Blessed is the one who waits for and reaches the end of the 1,335 days. These specific numbers have generated countless interpretations. Some read them as literal days during the Maccabean crisis. Others see symbolic periods or patterns repeated through history. The very precision of these figures suggests God measures time differently than we do. History unfolds not by accident, but according to divine understanding. The sealing creates a fascinating tension in how we approach prophecy. It invites both humble restraint and thoughtful engagement. We shouldn't claim complete understanding of mysteries that even Daniel found perplexing. Yet neither should we ignore these texts, as they were preserved to offer insight when needed most. Daniel himself models the right response. Though unable to fully grasp everything he saw, he remained faithful. The unexplained didn't lead to unbelief. Mystery became reason for continued trust rather than rejection. For listeners drawn to prophetic speculation, Daniel's sealed scroll offers a balanced perspective. Yes, study these passages. Yes, watch for their fulfillment. But hold interpretations lightly. The final unsealing comes not through clever analysis, but through events themselves, revealing meaning at their appointed time. Perhaps most comforting is the messenger's final promise to Daniel. You will rest, and then at the end of the days you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance. The prophet would not live to see all his visions fulfilled, yet he would ultimately participate in their completion. Death itself could not separate him from God's unfolding purposes. Daniel's quiet exit. Unlike many biblical heroes, Daniel receives no dramatic death scene. Scripture draws a quiet veil over his final days. The man who interpreted the writing on the wall for one empire and survived the lion's den in another simply fades from the narrative, having served his purpose. We know only the messenger's parting words. As for you, go your way till the end. You will rest. And then, at the end of the days, you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance. After decades of exile, service, and extraordinary visions, Daniel's reward would come not in his lifetime, but beyond it. What became of the elderly prophet? Jewish tradition suggests he died in Babylon, never returning to the homeland he was torn from as a youth. Some accounts place his tomb in Susa, modern-day Iran, where he possibly served during the later Persian period. If these traditions hold truth, Daniel represents a particular kind of faithfulness, serving God's purposes while never seeing the restoration he longed for. His bones rested in foreign soil, yet his heart remained connected to Jerusalem. This quiet exit suits Daniel's character. Throughout his story, personal ambition never drives him. When interpreting dreams leads to promotion, the text emphasizes Daniel's request that his friends be elevated too. When recognition comes, he consistently redirects glory to God rather than claiming credit. Daniel's life bridges two worlds. His youth witnessed Jerusalem's fall. His old age saw Persian policies allowing Jews to return home. Though apparently not returning himself, perhaps due to age or continued service where God placed him, he lived to see the exile's end approaching, the first stages of the restoration he had prayed for, beside open windows. His story offers special comfort to those who plant seeds they may never see bloom. Those working for justice often die before witnessing its arrival. Visionaries rarely live to see their dreams fully realized. Daniel reminds us that faithfulness matters more than seeing every promise fulfilled in our lifetime. The manner of his passing reflects his living. No dramatic martyrdom, just quiet faithfulness until the end. The man who resisted cultural pressure in small matters like food continued making daily choices of integrity throughout his life. Daniel's story closes not with death, but with promise. Rest now, inheritance later. For the exiled, the persecuted, the faithful living in hostile surroundings, his life whispers encouragement across centuries. Your present circumstances don't define your ultimate destiny. Your foreign address isn't your final home. The legacy begins after Daniel's passing. His influence only grew. During the turbulent centuries that followed, as empires continued their predicted rise and fall across the Near East, Daniel's writings became increasingly precious to the Jewish people. When Antiochus IV Epiphanes desecrated the temple in 167 BCE, many recognized this horror as the very abomination Daniel had foreseen. His ancient words suddenly felt immediate and relevant. The Maccabean family led a successful revolt, and stories spread about martyrs who chose death rather than violate dietary laws, following Daniel's example of faithfulness in seemingly small matters. Jewish apocalyptic literature flourished during this period, drawing inspiration from Daniel's visions. Books like 1 Enoch and Jubilees adopted similar imagery of beasts, heavenly courts, and final judgment. The community at Qumran who left us the Dead Sea Scrolls particularly treasured Daniel, producing multiple copies of his text. Daniel's portrayal of God as the ultimate judge of nations offered hope when earthly justice failed. His vision, the Son of Man coming on clouds, provided imagery that would later shape messianic expectations. Though living centuries before, Daniel had somehow spoken directly to later generations facing their own imperial threats. When Jesus began his ministry, he frequently referenced Daniel, especially when discussing the kingdom of God and end-time events. His self-designation as Son of Man deliberately echoed Daniel's vision. When asked about the future, Jesus pointed his followers to the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel. Early Christians, facing Roman persecution, found special meaning in Daniel's stories of faithful witnesses who refused to worship the emperor or his idols. The fiery furnace and lion's then became powerful metaphors for their own trials. The book of Revelation draws heavily from Daniel's imagery, expanding on his visions of beasts, thrones, and divine judgment. Throughout subsequent history, minority faith communities under pressure have repeatedly turned to Daniel for encouragement. Medieval Jewish communities in Europe, Christians in the early Islamic world, religious dissenters during the Reformation all found their situations mirrored in Daniel's experience as a faithful believer living under dominant cultures hostile to his practices. Political theologians across traditions have pondered Daniel's complex portrayal of the believer's relationship to earthly power, serving faithfully while maintaining clear boundaries. His ability to work within pagan systems without compromising core beliefs continues to inspire those navigating similar tensions today. Perhaps most enduringly, Daniel offers hope that history isn't random or meaningless. Despite appearances, the rise and fall of powers follows a pattern leading toward divine purpose. The empires that dominated Daniel's world, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, have all crumbled to dust, yet the faith tradition he represented continues. His legacy reminds us that true influence often flows not from official position, but from uncompromising character. Daniel served kings, but he answered to a higher throne. Interpreting Daniel. Few biblical books have generated more diverse interpretations than Daniel. Over centuries, readers have debated nearly every aspect of these ancient visions: their date, authorship, meaning, and fulfillment. Traditional views held that Daniel himself wrote the book during the Babylonian and Persian periods, recording actual events and genuinely predictive prophecies. This perspective sees the detailed forecasts of Greek and Seleucid history as evidence of divine inspiration, God revealing the future before it happened. In the modern era, many scholars proposed a different understanding. They suggested Daniel was written much later, around 165 BCE during the Maccabean crisis. From this view, the book presents history disguised as prophecy, events already past when written, framed as predictions to encourage the faithful during persecution. This dating debate connects to larger questions about how prophecy works. Is it primarily prediction of specific future events, or is it pattern setting, establishing themes that repeat throughout history? Jewish interpreters have traditionally seen Daniel as providing wisdom for living faithfully under foreign rule. The stories demonstrate how to maintain religious identity while participating in wider society. The apocalyptic sections offer hope that oppressive empires will eventually fall, however powerful they seem now. Early Christian readings focused on messianic elements, particularly connecting Daniel's Son of Man with Jesus. Church fathers like Jerome viewed the four kingdoms as Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome, with Christ as the stone that destroys the statue in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Medieval interpreters often applied Daniel's timetables to their own era. During the Reformation, Protestants frequently identified the little horn with the papacy, while Catholic scholars pointed it toward Islamic expansion or Protestant movements. Modern dispensationalists have developed elaborate timelines, placing many of Daniel's prophecies in our future, connecting them with the book of Revelation in a detailed end-time scenario. Others see most prophecies fulfilled in ancient events, while the principles continue to apply. These varied readings reveal something important about apocalyptic literature itself. Unlike straightforward narrative or legal texts, apocalyptic visions are multivalent, capable of meaningful application in different contexts. They invite readers into an interpretive process rather than providing simple answers. The imagery of Daniel has shaped how multiple faith traditions understand history's meaning. Beasts rising from the sea, ancient ones seated on thrones, books being opened. These powerful symbols continue speaking across cultural and temporal boundaries. Perhaps the wisest approach combines interpretive humility with appreciation for the text's ongoing relevance. Daniel himself didn't fully understand everything he saw. The command to seal certain words until the time of the end suggests some meanings unfold only over time. What remains constant is the book's central affirmation. Despite appearances, God remains sovereign over history. Empires rise and fall, but a greater kingdom awaits, one made without human hands that will endure forever. The man who stared down empires. Daniel stands as a quiet revolutionary in the biblical narrative, a man who changed history not by conquering nations, but by remaining unshaken in his convictions. From youth to old age, he navigated the dangerous intersection of faith and politics with remarkable wisdom. Taken from Jerusalem as a teenager, Daniel could have disappeared into history like countless other exiles. Instead, he found ways to serve foreign kings while keeping his heart anchored in deeper loyalties. His life unfolded at the crossroads of empires, witnessing Babylon's glory, its sudden fall, and Persia's rise to power. Throughout these massive political shifts, Daniel maintained an inner stability remarkable for someone living so far from home. The secret lay in his daily rhythms, the quiet discipline of prayer 3 times daily, windows open toward Jerusalem. These moments of connection with his God and heritage created space where neither Babylonian education nor Persian politics could fully claim him. Daniel's approach to cultural engagement offers timeless wisdom. He learned Babylon's language and literature thoroughly enough to excel, yet drew clear boundaries when practices conflicted with his core beliefs. Neither total separation nor complete assimilation. Instead, thoughtful participation with integrity. His political service itself became a form of prophetic witness. Kings who claimed absolute power encountered through Daniel a reality that transcended their thrones. Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar, Darius, each confronted the limitations of their authority through this unassuming Jewish exile, who politely but firmly acknowledged a higher law. Daniel's courage emerged not in dramatic revolutionary acts, but in steady daily choices. His refusal of the king's food, his continued prayers despite the lion's den threat, these quiet moments of faithfulness proved more lasting than military campaigns. Empires that seemed eternal have crumbled to dust, while Daniel's example still inspires those facing similar pressures today. The visions that came to him later in life transformed how many traditions understand history itself. Through Daniel's eyes, we glimpse history not as random chaos, but as movement toward purpose. Empires rise and fall in succession, yet something greater emerges beyond their temporary glory. The stone cut without hands ultimately replaces all human kingdoms. Perhaps most remarkably, Daniel maintained hope despite seeing tremendous suffering ahead for his people. His visions revealed centuries of conflict, persecution, and tribulation. Yet beyond these shadows, he glimpsed deliverance. The man who never returned to Jerusalem himself foresaw ultimate restoration. Daniel teaches us that true power often looks different than we expect. Real influence doesn't always come through official position or military might. Sometimes it grows through quiet integrity, through those who know which pressures to resist and which accommodations to make. It flows from people whose inner compass stays fixed, regardless of changing political winds. In a world still dominated by empires, whether political, economic, or cultural, Daniel's legacy offers both challenge and comfort. Challenge to maintain conviction when surrounded by contrary values. Comfort that faithfulness matters, even when its fruits may not be visible in our lifetime. Daniel stared down empires, not with armies, but with unshakable faith. The man who interpreted dreams for kings became himself a living interpretation of how to remain anchored when everything familiar has been taken away. His story whispers across centuries to anyone feeling overwhelmed by powers beyond their control. Stand firm. Keep your windows open toward home. Remember who you truly are.